Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the September 2nd, 2021 Committee on School Select Committee on School Facilities to order. I'm Stephen Pappas, your new chairman, and Landon Brown, our vice chairman. We both welcome everybody to today's meeting, both those who are present here and those who will be online. Committee, just a few comments. We will have Senator Cost joining us online. He's a little bit under the weather, so he'll be joining us via Zoom, and Representative Jennings will not be able to attend today's meeting. So first, let me remind everybody in the room to please silence their phones and laptop devices, anything that'll disturb us. Also, we do cut off public comment the night at 5 o'clock the night before most committee meetings. However, if someone out there needs to comment, I'll allow them to email Karen Vaughn. That's Karen VAUGHN at wyoleg.gov. Please email her in the next 30 to 60 minutes, and we'll get you on the list. With that, I'd like to welcome today, I believe, Commissioner Gilmore. Thank you for attending. Glad to have you here, Mike. With that, I think we can call roll. Karen, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Representative Walters.
Here.
Representative Jennings. Excused. Thank you, sir. Representative Harshman. Representative Banks.
Here.
Senator Rothfuss.
Here.
Senator Landon.
Here.
Senator Cost.
Here.
Or, sorry, you are online. I just saw you. My apologies. Senator Hutchings. Here. Vice Chairman Brown.
Here.
Chairman Pappas.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Do we have some video to be able to see? It's coming up. Oh, there we go. Senator Cost, welcome. Can you see us fine? Okay, thank you. All right, first order of business then is our draft legislation that was requested at our June 3rd meeting. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to our staff. Tanya, would you please lead us through these bills?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Recall at your last meeting in June, there was a potential discussion about a potential conflict dealing with the SIPA account and transfers to the major maintenance sub-account and the state penitentiary account. As a result of those discussions, the committee requested our staff draft legislation to eliminate the state penitentiary CapCon account and transfer the balance to the state capital construction account, to modify what would have transferred from the SIPA to the state pen account to the state capital construction account, and automate transfers from to the state capital construction account from the sub major maintenance account within the SIPA and the state mineral royalties account. Those automated transfers currently are within the budget bill, and this bill operationalizes those. If you'd like, I can go ahead and walk through the bill page by page.
Please do.
Beginning on page 1 is simply the introduction and the statutory references. Page 2, lines 1 through 16 contain the information related to the SIPA account. As you'll note at the bottom on lines 15 and 16, we've stricken a reference to 94220.1A, which is the state penitentiary account, which is repealed later in the bill. Subsection B now provides the transfer from the school major maintenance account within the SIPA to the school capital construction account. And then the Romanet 4, lines 12 through 22, replace the transfer to the state penitentiary of up to $10 million to the school capital construction account. I would draw your attention to line 22 on the bill, which is the date certain for that transfer to terminate. That was present in the the state penitentiary capital construction account. And so I just included that in copying that language over to this provision. 94224, starting on page 4, lines 1 through 18, amends the transfer for the school land mineral royalties account and automates the transfer from that account to the school capital construction account. The 2 repealers on the bottom of page 4, lines 20 and 21, those are both references. 94220-.1, excuse me, is the state penitentiary account, and the creation of that account is repealed. And 94715P Romanet 6 is a reference to the state penitentiary account in another statute. Subject to your questions.
Okay, thank you. Committee, questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to really 2 questions for LSO staff that currently we direct this 0.45% of the SIPA to major maintenance, but it's not an automatic flow.
Correct.
And so this makes it an automatic flow, but the flow changes from major maintenance to the state capital construction account. That's the first clarification. That's on page 3, Romanet 3. And then the second part of the bill really gets rid of the state pen account. And just for the committee and folks who are watching, you know, you go back 2015, we had the penitentiary crisis. Remember, we were going through, that was a major thing of our time. And then of course that got solved in probably another 20-year lifetime. So it was originally 50 million a year, is the way that pen bill came out. And then got taken down to 10. I apologize. It was kind of my bill. And I really hope we repeal this. And I just think this is a classic case that we always have to judge between today's revenues for today's people, or do you sock it away for what might happen for tomorrow's people? And we've created that balance. We take a significant amount of today's revenue and save it for future citizens. I think that's great. Hey, I've been a proponent of the Per Mill Trust Fund and all those funds, Hathaway. But this little 10 million for a prison, the last prison we built in Torrington, we bonded. And then we got cash for $8 natural gas and we paid it off. So this little $10 million that we're trying to stick away for what's going to be a $500 million bill 20 years from now or more, could be building, you know, 1 elementary school across the state a year. So I think it's really important. I mean, that part gets taken care of, and I get it, but I'm a saver, but I apologize. I shouldn't, you know, it was a different time and it's over now. That pen crisis is over. So I hope we can do that. I would ask the committee though, I'm going to make amendments, Mr. Chairman, that we just keep this flowing to major maintenance. And I think major maintenance is going to be there every year. And boy, and it just, and LSO is counting this money against the education major maintenance deficit, even though it takes another committee and the full legislature then to approve it in the budget bill. But this major maintenance thing, man, if we can just stay with that and stay the course. So that's going to be my amendment. I hope you'd consider as we go, but I really appreciate, Chairman, you guys bringing the bill to the committee, and I think we can do some good with this thing. So thank you.
Okay, and as you mentioned, the state penitentiary account, maybe Leanne can verify this, but we have roughly 20 million in that account now, but it's profiled to be double that, correct? Would you?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Leanne Hogue, LSO. So currently the cash balance of the account is 20.8 million. But there is a transfer, obviously, the 10 million per fiscal year. So over the course of the next 2 years, that's an additional 20 million.
Yeah, so we're talking $40 million.
So, Mr. Chairman, then a question for staff then, but that what happens to that 40 million? Is it swept into state CapCon as well?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Harshman, yeah, that would be the case.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Okay, Representative Banks, did you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That did answer my question. I was curious as to what the balance was in that account and what happens to that. I guess I'm just a little bit concerned though, and I know it's just sort of a, for lack of a better word, a drop in the bucket of what a whole new penitentiary would cost, but I'm concerned that if we're not starting to save a little bit for when that is going to happen, where that puts us way behind the 8 ball, even if it's $40 million, at least we have $40 million to put towards it. So I'm a little reluctant to get rid of that account altogether. So anyway, that's my thought.
Committee, any other comments? Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Following Representative Harshman's comments, it's sometimes hard to do. He did a good job, I think, of taking us back to 2015. I served on that task force. You might remember that took a careful look at where we are with our penitentiary. Fortunately, with the help of a lot of people in the room here, we found some remedies down there at the state penitentiary, which allowed us to get out from underneath a building plan that would have been hugely expensive. I think we bought ourselves 20 or 30 years minimum. So, I get the idea that, boy, we ought to start socking money away for whatever, for whenever. But I kind of lean the way the representative does, which is we're faced with major maintenance cost every single year and battling every single session to try to come up with the dollars it takes to take care of this fleet of, 25 million square feet of buildings out there. So I think this is a good thing to suggest to the other 80 some legislators, and I'm going to support it.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to weigh in along the same lines as the good senator. In an ideal world where we were fully funding the programs that we need to fund and had the revenue to do so, I think we would want to set away some funds for the future of our prison. But regrettably, we're not in that place. And so we have to be thoughtful about the value of the money at any given time. And honestly, the best use of our resources for any depreciating asset is to ensure that that depreciating asset doesn't depreciate any faster than it has to. And the studies that we've done over the past 5+ years indicate that we're still underfunding major maintenance rather dramatically. Even with these funds transferred, we will be underfunding major maintenance relative to the peak recommendation. So with regard to the time value of money, I think this just makes the most sense to put it where we know it will provide the highest return on investment. And yes, that does leave the cost of the prisons for a future legislature. But honestly, if we just have the money sitting there not doing work, it's a less valuable use of the limited revenue that we have relative to putting it to work on our schools. So this is a good approach. I think this is a sensible approach to make sure that we're using it to the highest and best way that we can. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Committee, any further comments? Okay, before we work the bill, is there any public testimony regarding this bill? Karen, any hands up online?
Mr. Chairman, if I could just clarify one thing.
Sure.
I know questions about the sweep of the money from the existing account. If you look on page 5, lines 1 through 9, there's a non-codified section that sweeps the money from the existing state penitentiary account to the state capital construction account. And I would note this bill is effective immediately.
And that would include all monies that are profiled, correct?
Upon the date of the effective date of this act, any monies in that account would be transferred to the state capital construction account.
Okay, thank you. Not seeing any public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
Second.
we have Senator Landon moved and Senator Representative Brown moved and Senator Landon seconded. Discussion committee?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Representative.
Mr.
Hartman.
Chairman and LSO staff can help me but way I marked this up was on page 3, just to eliminate Romanet 3. And then that 0.45% of the SIPA would stay in major maintenance, instead of switching that to capital construction. Now, if I need to divide that paragraph up a little bit so it automatically flows without going through the budget bill, but I didn't read it like that, but correct me if I made a mistake. So, Mr. Chairman, that's what I'm trying to do. The intent of the amendment is to take the 0.45% of the SIPA that currently flows to major maintenance and keep it flowing to major maintenance. And it will flow automatically, I think, in other parts of the bill. That's how I understand it.
So
I'm getting an affirmative nod.
am I understanding the sub account would be deleted then? No, no.
Oh, it's still. Mr. Chairman, as I read this, Romanet 3 on page 3 changes the 0.45% from major maintenance to capital construction. And I just think it's more supportive, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's more supportive for the legislature to take care of what we got, instead of putting 45 million a year into new construction. I know that can be shifted through budget bills and everything else to major maintenance, but I just think, so that's my intent. And if I'm in the wrong part of the bill, maybe LSO can help me out. Just confirm, I think I'm.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Harshman, you are correct that Romanet 3 transfers the sub-account, Romanet 3 transfers the major maintenance sub-account money to the school capital construction account. And if you were to look at the legislation as it exists currently, or the statute 94220A Romanet I, that is the 45% that you're talking about transferring to the sub major maintenance account. So the way the bill currently operates, or an existing law in concert with the bill, would be it would transfer the 45% to the sub account, the sub major maintenance account, and then with Romanet 3, that money from the major maintenance sub account would transfer to the school capital construction account. Does that answer your question, Representative Harshman?
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
This is a policy decision.
So, Mr. Chairman, just so I understand, and so I have this right in my head because I want to make the right motion, but currently it flows to major maintenance and sub account, and it holds there until released by the appropriations bill. The way the bill is written now, I think it flows from 0.45% SIPA to state school construction, doesn't go to state major maintenance. But then within that, it flows down or can be moved around, but I was just trying to make sure it still goes, first stop is major maintenance. That can always be changed by a majority vote of the legislature, but the first flow is right to major maintenance as currently.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Harshman, that is correct. Existing statute 9-4-220A Romanet 1 transfers the 45% to the sub major maintenance account. So if you'd like it to stop at that point rather than transferring to the state capital construction account, you are correct. Elimination of Romanet 3 would operationalize that.
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that was actually a request from Senator Rothfuss last time, Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I support this concept of trying to make sure that it goes first towards the major maintenance for the same reasons I discussed a few minutes ago. But so what I would like to understand, though, is if the motion ends up being strike Romanet 3, what is the full operational cash flow then when we incorporate all of the available funds and any sweep that's going on? Does everything then end up routing to the major maintenance sub account? Or how much ends up in which of the two accounts? I guess I'll just ask it that way. Walk me through what happens if 3 goes away.
I think if 3 goes away, your existing statute requires that 45% of the maximum amount which may be credited to the SIPA account is credited to the school major maintenance sub-account, which is within the SIPA but accounted for separately.
And the rest stays,
The rest of the money in the SIPA account,
the sweep that would take place in the non-codified and everything else this bill does, I'm just seeing what it continues to do with regard to the prison sub-account.
so recall, as Representative Harshman said, there are sort of 2 parts to this bill. And the first was to eliminate the state penitentiary account.
Mhm.
And that sweep will still occur with the non-codified section and with the repealing language. So the 40 million from the existing state pen account will transfer to the state capital construction account.
That's what I was looking for, okay. And still, we eliminate 3, that's still what happens.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay, but then the cash flow on the distribution, when we eliminate Romanet 3, rather than going to the school capital construction account, is going to stay in the major maintenance sub-account until appropriate. Thank you.
Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I like number 3 being in there, and I will explain my position as we go here. And the point of having the elimination of the sub-account is that major maintenance is the first priority of this budget. And so by eliminating the major maintenance sub-account, to do any major maintenance, we have to get the money into the school capital construction account, because major maintenance is considered capital construction. So for the division to be able to do the work, we have to get the money to the school capital construction account. Currently in statute, we have a pit stop in this sub-account for major maintenance. Then the legislature has to appropriate the money out of the sub-account into the school capital construction account to proceed with any activities. And so by what this bill does is we eliminate that pit stop in the sub-account. But it does not eliminate the fact that major maintenance is still the #1 priority of the school capital construction account. 2% of the cost replacement value is factored across all the square footage in the state, and that number is derived, and that's the #1 thing the school capital construction account pays for, is the 2% major maintenance of all our buildings in the state. Then we see what other component projects are needed, what other true new construction is needed, and all of that sort of stuff. By having this pit stop of this money in the major maintenance account, it gives us a warm feeling, but it really doesn't do anything except allow us a chance to not direct enough money towards major maintenance, is what I see occurring. And so by eliminating the pit stop in the sub-account, then we send it straight to the capital construction account, and we get these projects moving right off the bat. And so that's why I would speak in favor of leaving the bill as drafted. So we eliminate that pit stop in the sub-account. The 0.45% of SIPA will go straight to school capital construction. It will then make its first activity being major maintenance, because that's our #1 legislative statutory responsibility is major maintenance. And I agree with the good representative from here in Natrona County who said major maintenance and taking care of what we have is going to be our first priority going forward. That will still occur. It will just occur in a far more efficient manner. And so that's why I would speak in favor of leaving it as is. And that's my internally how I can rationalize and view the flows so that I can comprehend where the flows are and what's going on. So if I'm misrepresenting those flows, I'd certainly love to be corrected and whatnot, but that would be my position and thought here at the time.
Thank you. Representative Brown, did you? Oh, okay. I thought you were raising your hand. Senator, Representative Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, and I sitting here and I agree with everything you said. And how do we then, as you read the bill though, our fellow members are going to read, it's moving from school major maintenance sub-account to state school capital construction account. Not everybody knows what you just said, that the first priority is major maintenance. So I'll withdraw this thing if we think it's, but I just want to know how we get that across, how that, because when I read this, it sounds like, hey, we're gonna start it up here with school Capcom and work it through. Not everybody has that same knowledge that you have, Representative Walters. So that's my question. And
Okay, I don't think we need to withdraw anything. I didn't have a motion for an amendment, so,
So, Mr. Chairman,
yeah, Senator Landon.
just a little more conversation. You know, that's been the age-old problem. As the representative knows, he's been on this committee with me for a long time. Senator Roth was the former chairman. You know, we have that hill to climb every single session that we go to Cheyenne, is to help people understand, we're not talking state school construction. That's what the name of the account is. But our first responsibility is this maintenance piece. And so, yeah, that's the tough policy choice we have. Do we funnel it directly? And then we've got fellow members saying, well, you're just putting it down there because you want to build some buildings. And we all know that's not the case. Our emphasis the last several years has been, we've got to take care of what we've got. So that's just a little more conversation about something I think we have faced all along, is that, you know, there is this connotation that state school construction is only construction.
And, you know, I have to tend to agree. You know, frankly, if it's going to be used either for major maintenance or school Capcom, it has to be transferred to the state capital construction account, right? So it's got to move there anyhow. So, Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could just ask Representative Walters directly. So I think I agree 100% with what you're saying. And what kind of flipped at everything in my mind was how you said this, if we remove this, it actually leaves the balance of major maintenance sitting in the appropriations committee's hands. Is that, am I understanding that correctly? That at that point, with that money sitting in that SIPA sub account, it's then subject to appropriations, and whether or not we can get appropriations to say, yes, we want to fund this for any major maintenance, and we could actually short that. Whereas if we keep this in here right now, it just free flows and goes in there, and we don't have to worry about that discussion or that battle between, you know, the House and the Senate or anybody in appropriations. Am I understanding you correctly on that?
Mr. Chairman, in response to that question, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My take of it would be this, in its existing fashion, this bill totally disregarded. In its existing fashion, this committee would make a recommendation annually that the money from the sub account would be applied to the school capital construction account for major maintenance and other needs. Because once the dollars hits the account, you know, a greenback's a greenback. The dollar doesn't know where whether it came from a major maintenance account or from somewhere else as to what project it gets spent on. But I think it would be a recommendation from this committee that that money be moved from that account to the school capital construction account where it would be expended. That recommendation would then have to go through the appropriations committee. It would probably go, depending on how leadership wanted to do it during the session, it may go as a letter from this committee to the appropriations committee for the appropriations committee to take up, or as a bill that would go out on the floor and then get re-referred to the appropriations committee for action. That's, in my mind, that's how it would transpire, this bill notwithstanding. With this bill, the money would go straight into the school capital construction account, at which time this committee would make all recommendations, of which one is we're going to fund 2% of the CRV, which is going to be 150 million for the biennium, rough number there. And then we have component level projects. We have school demolitions and all other things. I think the good senator from Casper made a great point when discussing this committee's responsibility to educate our colleagues on this issue. And that school capital construction account really does cast a strange light on the topic because it instantly makes people think we're building new buildings. But major maintenance is capital construction. Major maintenance is an HVAC system that is that in the eyes of a contractor is considered construction. If you think of your own house, you replace the outlet in your house, you're really doing some construction projects today. You went to the local hardware store, you bought some things. That's construction, as simple as an outlet replacement. And so capital construction of any kind, it's our duty to educate our members and our colleagues that major maintenance is capital construction. And so, as I said, I think this just eliminates a pit stop, and it eliminates one chance for things to get derailed. The faster we can and simpler we can put money in the account, know that it's paid for, the easier it is to proceed.
Senator Landon.
Well, well said by the representative. I think just a final thought in that regard. I think ultimately it's always going to be up to our appropriations committee colleagues. The best that we can do is make that recommendation, move it on into the appropriations room, and hopefully out of appropriations and out onto the floor, and we talk about all this stuff. But our charge is always going to be to present and defend the work that we've done during an interim, to talk about what we think needs to be done with this fleet of schools that we take care of and that we analyze every year. So you'll always have that sign off, by the appropriations committee. So,
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Rothfuss first, and then Senator Harshman after.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Contemplating the construction where we have this Romanet 3 and looking back at the original statutes for the SIPA, which directs the funds in B1 to the 45% to the school major maintenance sub-account. If we wanted to avoid the problem that Representative Harshman was discussing with kind of drawing attention to it looking like it was moving, perhaps the better approach would be to amend the Romanet 1, and rather than putting it into a SIPA sub-account, putting it directly into the school capital construction account, and then maintain the language of shall be expended only for school major maintenance obligations of the state, so that those funds are sort of internally earmarked to achieve that. I think the reality is as I read this paragraph 1, even though there's some nice flowery language around it, which says that these funds in the sub-account can only be used for major maintenance, I don't think this paragraph can bind the appropriators from moving it to any other account they want, spending it for any reason. So we created some flowery language that provides intent, but the reality is it's not binding. So I don't see why we couldn't put together some flowery language for the intent that isn't binding for this move to the sub-account. And that would just be amending Romanet 1. So I guess the only question I have for staff would be, is there concern about eliminating Romanet 3 and amending Romanet 1? I know that Romanet 3 has a after such and such a year clause, which is probably the purpose of calling it out separately, but would there be a problem with restructuring paragraph 1 to directly appropriate the 0.45 to the school capital construction account and then maintain the shall be expended language?
Yeah. You have a
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, I think that's a policy decision by the members. If that's your will, we can certainly operationalize that.
Okay.
I think there'll probably be conforming amendments, if I understand what you're saying, to eliminate the major maintenance sub-account within the SIPA.
Representative Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so I think listening to all of the conversation, I think there might even be an easier fix on Romanet 3, and it would be just on line 4. You just keep all that language through line 4, funding for the purpose of funding school district major maintenance, kind of restating the Romanet 1, which the good senator talked about, and then just eliminate and school district capital construction. So then this keeps this flow going. It doesn't say to our colleagues right off the bat it says what we're doing with it. And then when you go down below, just leave all all that loan, and if you wanted to, after school district capital construction account, establish, or what, you could put in more flowery language for the purposes of funding school major maintenance. You could say it again if you wanted to in this Romanet 3, but I think even if you just knocked out that school district capital construction right at the, on 4 and 5 this is the reality of it. We're trying to, this is a good policy change. We all want this policy change and we want it to be successful, and words matter. And that's all I'm trying to get us through but without doing a bunch of gymnastics on this thing.
Well,
Chairman, thanks.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And I think that will work also. The one concern I have is just from kind of a legacy confusion standpoint, where we would then have a sub account which serves no purpose. It sort of exists to flow into, and then there's an immediate side channel out of it into another account. We could do that. We've done it before. But if you have a 100% flow through, it seems like it's just responsible for us to eliminate the account for the sake of minimizing the number of arrows Don Richards has to draw, if for no other reason.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Senator Land.
Thank you. Not to belabor, but I think this is a really good policy discussion that we're having. It feels like to me, at least on the Senate side of things, that would be a little bit tougher lift. If you indicate that we're going to eliminate a sub account within SIPA, we have colleagues on the Senate side who probably don't like that. I'm just saying, we'd have a little bit tougher job to do, Mr. Chairman, to push that through. It all results in the same thing. And I guess I would probably be inclined to see what we can do with the language in 3 and maybe float the bill forward that way. I think it maybe puts up a slightly smaller red flag.
Okay, Senator Land or Senator Rothfuss.
I wish I disagreed.
Okay, do I hear an amendment at all
So
coming out of this?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to propose an amendment for the committee's consideration on, and this is so not getting rid of all of 3, just that beginning on line 4 and school, going to line 5, district capital construction. And then that accomplishes this flow of the money like we all want to do, but it says specifically what we're trying to do with it and restates it. So that's my motion.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that amendment has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Any more discussion on the bill? Seeing none, could we have a roll call, please?
My apologies. On 22 LSO 0029, as amended, state funds, investments, and distributions. Representative Walters.
Aye.
Representative Jennings excused. Representative Harshman.
Aye.
Representative Banks.
Aye.
Senator Rothfuss.
Aye.
Senator Landon.
Aye.
Senator Cost.
Aye.
Senator Hutchings. Vice Chairman Brown.
Aye.
Chairman Pappas.
Aye. So,
It has passed. Will that be House or Senate?
Next call.
I think we'll send that one to the House. I think that's the logical bill.
House bill it is.
Yeah.
That'll be House. Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Well, Mr. Chairman, just so everyone on the committee knows, we were ready to go to battle. You guys take it first.
Okay, before we go to the next bill, I'd like to just Make note that Commissioner Livingston is here, has joined us. Thank you for joining us today. Pleased to have you here. Thank you. Okay, could we go on to the next bill, please?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, 22 LSO-30, school facilities conforming amendment. You'll recall from the discussions at the last meeting that there were a couple of housekeeping items that are remnants from your Senate File 2, which passed yesterday, or excuse me, not yesterday, last year. That had some pretty extensive amendments to the school facilities statutes. And so just walking through the bill, 2115-121 on page 2, lines 15 and 16, there were references to educational suitability and technology readiness. Both of those components were eliminated by Senate File 2. And again, and then Romanet 5, lines 19 through 22, eliminating that same language. And this bill is also effective immediately. One thing I would note, I did talk to our lead legal, Ian Shaw, in our office, and we both agreed that this could possibly be brought through the reviser's bill. So I mentioned that as a side note as well.
Committee, I've also discussed this with the good vice chairman, and we both agree that probably rather than trying to push another bill through a short budget session, that maybe it might be logical to put this in a reviser's bill.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to put in a reviser's bill. Any okay.
Question.
Probably should have asked for public comment, but I don't imagine there's any out there, but I don't see any hands going up. So, okay, let's, does this need,
Just.
yeah, just voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll move that to a reviser's bill. All right. With that, we're on to agenda item number 4, State Construction Department response to questions posed by the committee at the June 3rd meeting. And so I will turn the floor over to the director, Jerry Vincent.
Good morning and thank you. Before we have Laura give the update, I appreciate this conversation about major maintenance and being construction, because you'll see it kind of rolls under this item very well. When we're meeting with WDE, we're trying to bifurcate each Esser or ARPA into, is it instructional or is it capital? Because then on our end, it could be component, it could be major maintenance. If it's not a filter change out, we need an architect, we need drawings, there's a contractor, they do bid. So we use that nomenclature interchangeably when we're looking at components. So we appreciate you thinking of it the same way. As you know, we've had a number of meetings with WDE. We've given the direction from June 3rd, and I'd like Laura to talk about where we are to date and where our spreadsheets are and our tracking and some of the projects that we're seeing thus far.
Thank you. Ms. Henderson.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Laura Anderson with the State Construction Department. So just to let you know that we put this packet together on August 11th, so information is as of that date. Per that date, we've had 4 meetings between the SCD and the WD, and each one of us have had internal meetings with our separate entities as well in discussing it and trying to get things together. And then we got our data guru on our side and the one on their side together so they could talk shop about all the data exchanges that need to happen. So one of the things that we looked at is we were looking at the Esser funding that has already happened, to use that as a framework, because we really don't know much about what ARPA is going to do with that Section 604, because they really haven't released any guidelines. Although yesterday morning, they actually released a little bit of a change on their website, and they updated it to show what the actual allocations are going to be per state. And so Wyoming's actual allocation is going to be $109,467,449 is what we're going to get in there. But we don't have any guidelines yet or any application process. So we're trying to use what we know about ESSA, the previous ESSER information, so that we can build a framework for collaboration and try and see how that information will come together. So another thing that is going on is WDE held a webinar on August 3rd, and they had some information on both ESSER and the ARP funding. And they went ahead and covered that with all of the districts. They also got a letter provided to them from the USD Department of Education that provided a little bit of clarification. All the states are trying to get that information, I guess, and someone from New Hampshire got a hold of somebody at Department of Ed and got them to write a letter, and that thing has spread like wildfire through all the states. So they provided that to the districts as well, which provides some clarification on the possible uses and implications of that, as well as a link to the U.S. Department of Education website that provides information on improving ventilation in schools. So all that information is going out to the school districts as they get it. We're trying to make sure the school districts have it. So on the SCD side, one of the things that we're trying to do is reinforce that information. We can't force school districts to use money on any particular system. That's not in our purview, and it specifically says that in all of the Esser grants that we can't do that. What we can do is educate them and make sure they have all the information that they can to know what they can use those funds for, so they can make the proper determination and prioritize for their school district how they can best utilize those funds. So we have a copy, we gave a copy of all that information to our project managers who deal with the districts on a regular basis, daily and weekly. They're dealing with them so that they will know as well. So if a district is talking to them about a specific project, our project managers can say, hey, you know, that one might qualify. You should go out to the WDE website and here's the information. You guys should check that out. That's, we're trying to educate as we go. Also, we have posted all of that information on our homepage on our website, and we've blasted it out in emails to the district as well. So they definitely know that it's out there and they know where to go to find out the information that they need. So we're all trying to back each other up with that information. Additionally, on the data front, we worked with WDE, and we put together a workflow on how we feel like this is going to flow. And as Director Vincent said, we're trying to delineate between what's a capital construction major maintenance component project that would deal with the facilities in our buildings as opposed to something that's more educational related. So we've got a workflow together with that. If WDE sees anything that they think might qualify, they're not a subject matter expert in that. They shoot it over to our supervisor for our project manager. He looks at it and says, yes, this is one that's ours. We flag it. And then the information goes automatically through our system. We start gathering that data. They've also set up a separate form for the construction data where when they're entering their data for the grant application, there are separate sections that would provide us the information we need, such as which buildings this would apply to, and it gets shot over to our side of the house through an email, and then we start gathering that data and putting workflow codes to it and that type of information so that we can gather that and then bring reporting back to you once we have it. Now, this is going from this point forward. We don't know what was done prior to us getting involved with that. So we reached out to the Department of Education, and in your packet, they provided some details on the information that they've seen so far. But since we started doing this, we've had 4 school districts apply for 5 applications. And there is 1 project out there from Platt for an HVAC system where they actually have the funding. They're doing it in 3 parts. They're using component money that was approved previously that they got as component money from you all. And then they're also using some of their major maintenance funds to complete part of the project. And they're applying for COVID funds to help complete the project on their HVAC system.
So if you recall, June 3rd was a while ago. There was 2 things that this, our involvement now in the tracking is for Esser 2 forward. The Esser 1 monies had largely been already out and expended. So that's what we're taking on and tracking. And then, as Laura said, through our project managers, through the districts, we're doing exactly what we heard here on June 3rd from some of you. Let's try to get some bang for the buck was the term out of this Esser money. So Platt 1 so far is sort of our poster child on how we can take Esser and component and major maintenance and put it all together and deliver something that we normally wouldn't have been able to do that much of before. So we're starting to get that word out, and I think they're seeing it, recognizing.
Thank you. Go ahead.
That's about all I have
Okay.
as far as the collaboration. Are there any questions?
Committee, any questions? Just a note under the collaboration piece. So we did, Vice Chairman Brown and I did facilitate a meeting the week after our last select committee meeting with the department and with both departments, with the WDE and with the State Construction Department. And it was a very informal meeting just to get everybody around the table to start talking. And I'm actually pleased with the things that I've heard that have happened since then. It hasn't just been rhetoric, especially from the top level. I've seen the worker bees down below actually collaborating and working together on these projects. When WED has a question, they call over, and they've been sharing databases. So I'm really pleased with that effort, and I know that's something we wanted to see. So Senator Hutchings.
Just comment, Mr. Chairman, as we go through this particular state construction department, if you wouldn't mind telling me what page you're on. I've been able to track and kind of like after skimming and following with you, but it would be kind of nice to know where you are in the progress, because you talk super fast. So I got it at the end where you were. So just a comment. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that, any other questions on the response for question 1, which was, it was on pages 1 through 4, right, Mr. Chairman? 1 through something like that. Yes,
Thank you,
Representative
Mr.
Walters.
Chairman. Laura, could you repeat the amount that the state will be receiving? I think it was 109 million. Just wanted a little bit of clarification on that, as I did not get that noted down quickly enough.
Yes, I'd be happy to. It's $109,467,449. And that just came out yesterday.
But my understanding is no guidance yet.
No guidance yet,
Yeah.
no additional guidance, and it still has the same rhetoric from May 10th that says we'll be accepting applications sometime this summer. I don't know what their idea of summer is, but I think it's starting to wane. So hopefully every day I'm checking. So hopefully maybe before our next meeting, we'll have another update for you. I certainly hope so, but out of my control.
Yeah, and just to note, we do even have a larger balance than that out of our ESSER 1 monies that hasn't been spent. So, just a note. Okay, I think committee, if there's no other questions on that, let's move on to the next one.
Just one.
Oh, excuse me, Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry to hold this up, but Mr. Anderson, can you enlighten me as to the $433,000 project in Bighorn 1? That one kind of stood out to me. That's a big amount of money.
Senator Leonard, if you just give me a moment, that's all information that WDE provided directly to us, and I don't have anything other than what's written on the page. I don't have any additional information, but we could certainly find out for you if you'd like me to.
That would, Mr. Chairman, that would be fine. I can get
We may
offline.
have WDE may be online. Maybe they could ask your comment. We do. Ms. Hamill, good morning. Would you be able to respond to that comment?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Yes, the Bighorn number 1, it was reimbursement to upgrade, as the memo says, the school's technological capacity. A lot of classrooms hadn't been updated to have the ability to provide that hybrid instruction that we saw happening a lot last year, with some students attending in the class, some students attending offsite through what we called classroom-based virtual education.
Thank
Senator
you.
Landon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Anything else? That's it. Okay, we can move on. Thank you. Go, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on page 5, tab 2, and we can have Laramie 1, Mr. Dave Bartlett come to the microphone. The ask back in June 3rd was if we could come back with the Laramie 1 master plan and some explanation of it. In subsequent meetings, it was maybe it's not so much the master plan, but maybe ARP Elementary, or maybe the master plan as it relates to ARP Elementary. So we had the master plan printed up by that time, but we put it in case there is a question regarding that. The district worked to update it, got it to us. It's in the packet. And then as it relates to ARP Elementary, if the questions were what has been done in the past, we would know that as a department because we tracked. If it was, what do you think you have coming up down the road? Then certainly that's with the district. So with that, I'll turn things over to Mr. Bartlett.
Mr. Bartlett, welcome. Floor is yours. Would you please push your, there you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. So with ARP Elementary, what I would tell you is in terms of our long-range plan, our long-range plan was actually a result of most cost-effective remedy study through the School Facilities Commission. It started out to be 912 because we were over capacity. We quickly expanded it to K-8 because of the amount of growth in Cheyenne. So what we were able to do with that Mercer study was actually look at all 50 facilities and determine whether it be a condition or a capacity issue, and how would we marry those together to best utilize capital and major maintenance dollars. So what I would tell you is ARP ranks 35th on the needs index. LCSD currently has 12 schools that rank higher than that in terms of condition. Those numbers are rather old. So what I would tell you, of those 12, 4 of them have either been replaced or had major renovations take place in the last 4 years. 8 remain that rank higher. 4 of those in our long-range plan are actually partner projects. I'll give you an example. Fairview Lephart. It's a K3 and a 4-6 building. Each of them, they're both very old. Lephart is one that we believe has pretty much gone beyond its useful life. So when those projects elevate up on the list, we would actually look to do an addition to Lephart, and we would surplus Fairview. So we've gone through our whole plan and looked at that. ARP Elementary, in the past 15 years, we have expended about 1.3 million in major maintenance. A majority of that would be a roof, a major asbestos abatement, and a boiler. And we really have moved into the role of ensuring life safety is taken care of in that building. I know the report you have speaks to it being at the enrollment. I apologize. Well, I looked at actual enrollment numbers as of yesterday, and what I would tell you is we have 305 students in the building. We do have 5 modules on site. We have 113 students over capacity, and we're at 158% capacity. But in that triad in Cheyenne, we're running at 97% capacity, and we've got a great deal of projected growth. So what we are looking to do is wait for those projects to elevate through the current methodologies with the SFD and with our long-range plan. As they come up, we would identify that bundle or packet of projects and address it accordingly.
Okay. Committee questions? Representative Landon, since you had brought this up, any comments?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I appreciate the staff and Mr. Bartlett bringing this forward. Really what my biggest concern was, and something that we have discussed in subsequent meetings as well, was really this idea of you fix one window and that entire school goes down the list and drops down, and then you have 8 more schools that move up the list, and magically the atmosphere of that school is not fixed. And ARP just happens to be kind of the poster child in Laramie County. One, I hear from quite a few constituents throughout the city and throughout the community that just tends to be the one to go forward. So really, more than anything, this was an act of just trying to show what happens when you do put, a few pieces together on a school, what it does to the rest of that school. And so I appreciate the discussions that we've had subsequently since last meeting. I appreciate you guys bringing this forward and explaining a little bit more to the rest of the committee as well. But certainly, being new to this committee, it was eye-opening to me to have those discussions. So thank you.
Okay. Committee, any further discussion on this topic?
And
Director?
Representative Brown, I appreciate you bringing that up. When we get to the overview of the rules in chapter 8, I was going to give an overview. I will be prepared to go as in-depth as you want. If I can't answer it, I'll get back to you on it because it's been ongoing. But one of the reasons to address what you're talking about with ARP is we had factors in there, and listening to districts, they're saying, well, they either seem arbitrary or capricious or punitive. And then what does a 0.67 mean if we put a new roof on it, it goes down to 0.31? We go, oh, it must be good right now, right? There's nothing else to do. So that was part of what chapter 8 about, is taking that off the table, allowing the districts to formulaically look at capacity versus condition. We don't have a large capacity issue in this state, so it allows them to hone in on condition when they're setting things, and addresses more things like what you're talking about. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Is that, Mr. Bartlett, any other comments before we move on?
Mr. Chair, to Director Vincent's point, just a brief history. ARPA actually had ranked 36 on the index in 2010. Just to give you an example, we had a failing roof. So in the process of repairing that roof, because of the time of construction, they used a spray-in asbestos product for insulating. So of course we had a rather expensive abatement to do the roof. And at the same time, we did a boiler, which we had intended to be something we could remove and reinstall in a different location in the district. But what we experienced that summer was through a desk audit, because of our expenditures in 2011, that ranking went from 36 to 164th. And so we were actually prepared as it moved up on the needs index. We had purchased 10 acres. We were ready to do the replacement, but obviously when it drops to 164th, you kind of shift your approach. And so in 2013, when the new scores came out, it did move back up to 40th. But, to Director Vincent's point there, if you do spend large amounts on certain components, it really does wreak havoc on the actual scoring. So, and that's what we've experienced there.
Okay. All right. Doesn't appear we have any more discussion. Director Vincent, let's move on.
Thank you. We have under tab 3, page 21, we have George Glida coming up to the microphone. So the June 3rd request was to talk about leasing a building versus purchase a building. And I will say, as George is getting settled in, a lot of assumptions have to be made by us when you're setting up a scenario in which to be discussed. And just as Murphy's Law would have it, one of the schools that was the key on the assumption of the square footage was incorrect. So it sort of changed the output and the narrative and everything. So we were glad that was caught by LSO. We pivoted and changed, and that's why you have that handout in front of you today. So we appreciate your indulging us. And with that, we'll roll to George.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, we'll be working off of the corrected copy. It's about 4 pages. Everybody should have one. This is a response to the request for a back of the envelope comparison of lease versus buy versus build. That's how it was stated, and we tried to stick to that mission and make sure we answered that question that way. The analysis is limited in scope and depth of research. And the reason I say that is, okay, it's a back of envelope comparison. So we didn't hire any real estate consultants or anything like that, or any engineers or architects to do this. We did it all in-house. In order to do that, as the director said, we have to make some assumptions and some estimates on what costs will be. The approach was to utilize readily available data, which we had about the leases for the Montessori school, the Potter school, and the Pass school buildings. So we did use that information, but where necessary, we made assumptions to conceptually compare the accumulated cost of either purchasing or building. So the analysis may be helpful, not only as a comparison to these current leases, but also in the future, if this question comes up, this might be kind of a good rule of thumb to take a look at and say, okay, are we covering all these issues plus a whole lot more that need to be considered when you're looking at leasing versus purchasing or building. So we've used the three buildings, the Montessori, the Potter, and the Pass School. We used those lease amounts, and I've listed them in your information sheet on page 1. If you look at the third bullet down under the Montessori project, it's the third bullet point, and we state there that we've also increased those at a rate of 3% per year to account for some escalation in those lease costs. And we've done that in all the leases. We've also provided some information about the buildings. I'm not going to go over it all unless you spot an item that you have a question on. I'll be glad to answer it, but I would move on to the next page then, which I think in handout is called page 22 of 43. For comparison, we chose the Montessori building. We used its size. It's located in Laramie, and it's 12,168 square feet. We made a conceptual or theoretical comparison of purchasing a similar sized building. We have described the assumptions and estimates made to calculate a long-term capital investment. So we wanted to compare the cost here of leasing versus a purchase. So we set up a scenario where we said, okay, if we purchase a building of 12,168 square feet, what might that look like? And on page 22, we've listed kind of all the conditions that we considered, and we've detailed them out for you. If there's any, and their assumptions, probably one of the big assumptions is, what would the cost of a building be? We looked at about 9 samples that I was able to pull off the internet of buildings that were for sale around the state. They kind of averaged about $167 per square foot. We also calculated that it would take about $83 per square foot to do some upgrades and get them ready for a school use, because some of those buildings, they weren't old schools. They were all kinds of different commercial buildings, but it was the only available data that we could kind of wrap our arms around to use for this comparison. Then we calculated what the major maintenance budget would be for a building, purchasing a building, and then the major maintenance. We used the averages statewide. Buildings vary a lot when it comes to the actual cost of major maintenance, kind of as you've talked about this morning already, and as Mr. Bartlett has explained for ARP. But we did use an average. We also assumed that would escalate at 6% a year, which has kind of been the historic norm for major maintenance. We calculated in a budget, again, using a statewide average because we don't know what the condition of the building is. And we included utilities and insurance. So if you turn to page 20, it's marked 23, it's the next page. We also did the same exercise for a new building. So building a new building, 12,168 square feet. Again, same size, and that's to be able to compare apples to apples on this comparison to the Montessori lease. And again, we listed all the same conditions that we accounted for there. One factor that I'll point out when it comes to major maintenance for new buildings that was a little bit different than the purchase buildings, we delayed the start of the major maintenance expenditures for the first 5 years since it's a brand new building. And then for the next half the amount for the years 6 through 20, and then the full amount for years 21 through 50. Again, it's a very rough estimate of what the actual maintenance costs might be, but we did factor it in so that we could account for the way that impacts the actual costs. Then we noted that the Potter and Pass schools could be subject to the same comparison individually. So we could compare Potter and Pass individually, just like we're comparing the Montessori. That got to be a lot of work. We would have added about 3 or 4 more lines on the graph to do that. And we said, well, we have Montessori, and that kind of tells the picture for a school lease comparison to building and purchasing. But what about a different approach for the Potter and Pass buildings? Because they actually cover a K-12 range in those 2 buildings. So we said it might be helpful to the committee to look at what would it take to replace a building with new construction compared to leasing the 2 buildings, Potter and Pass, together for a K-12 school. So we took a look at the size that we would derive for a K-12 school based on commission sizing methodologies for their enrollment. And we used 274 student enrollment, which was the last report that we had. Then we also accounted for construction costs. We accounted for major maintenance, just like we did on the smaller building.
And then I would just add on the construction costs, another one of the assumptions that we made was to take costs that we already had in the books prior to COVID because of the hyperinflation on it. So it's the variables that George is talking about and the assumptions and how we rolled here, but we took numbers prior to the COVID numbers. And we'll actually have a conversation with you about this afternoon under the biennium budget because we have a COVID hyperinflation project in there we want to discuss with you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Director. Again, just reiterate the point that, this is a conceptual theoretical kind of comparison. And if at the time you actually decided to explore doing something like this, making one of these changes, you would really want to get updated information, real information on all these points. But we've gotten as close as we could. Next, I'd like to turn your attention, if I could, to the graph. It's the last page in the handout. And I believe it's on the back. Well, it's page 25 to 43 is what I have marked on the handout. Yeah. So I'd like to start there by, and I think this illustrates the comparison that was asked for. If we look at Montessori schools, you can see the comparison of the costs and the number of years to break even. We can see at the Montessori lease, which is the green line, we can compare that with the purchase of the same size building, which is a purple line. And you can see that it's about a 19-year break even point. If you compare it to new construction of the same size, which is the darker blue line, you could see that it's about a 27-year break even. Then next we would focus on the bright blue line. That's a representation of the Potter Pass combined as a K-12 school. And the brown line is the comparison of the cost to build a new building of similar size. You can see where that brown line and the bright blue line crosses out at about a 30-year break-even point. So, Mr. Chairman, I would stand for any questions or clarifications.
Yeah. Senator Rothfuss, since this was your request.
Absolutely. And
Let you
I
tell
just
us.
honestly wanted to say thank you. This is perfect. This is exactly what I was hoping to see. And I appreciate that, you made reasonable assumptions. The back of the envelope approach is exactly what I was hoping for. And I think this gives us exactly what we need to understand. And I think allows us to feel certainly more comfortable with our leasing approach right now as being reasonable. And that's exactly what I was looking for was a confirmation that this was a rational choice for us. So thank you for the effort and thanks for this data and result.
Very welcome.
Okay. Committee, is there any other questions or comments on this? Certainly, I know, looking at the square foot costs of these leases, they're certainly not exorbitant. The Montessori lease is around just north of $15 a square foot, which is logical, but if you look at the Poder, that's at $8.50 a square foot. And the Pass School is at a little over $11.50. It's just, I don't understand actually those numbers, but that's those are good numbers. So I'm pleased to see that. Okay, I think we're done with this topic. Thank you, George. Director, please carry on.
Mr. Chair, I'm looking ahead at a 10 a.m. break coming up, and I perceive a chapter 8 in the rules update may take a while. So I was wondering if you would like to switch to the financial obligations, major maintenance update item next.
That would be great. Thank you
We'll
for
have George.
thank you for having eyes on the agenda.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, this is in response to the request for an update on financial obligations for major maintenance and information regarding the appropriate percentage for maintaining Wyoming schools.
We're on tab 5, page 39.
Tab 5, page 39. Thank you. Okay, everybody there? Okay. Your comments this morning really set the stage for this discussion. You're way ahead of us, way ahead of me on this presentation, I think, because you've done what you've done this morning and had the discussion that you did. The purpose that we brought to your attention here to answer the question was, what are the financial obligations? Well, the obligation is directed by statute, and I've listed the statute there. It's been in place since 1998. So it's been around quite a long time as far as, the need to address major maintenance in the school program. Then we move to the term appropriate percentage. What is that? How's that determined? Again, it's required in statute. There's a slot in the statute for that. Currently, it's 2%. You've talked at length this morning about, making sure that there's some commitment and some understanding of the importance of major maintenance. So from there, we move down to saying, well, how can we help you with this? How can we help you get your arms around this? What we decided to do is point out all the studies that have been done in about the past 5-6 years that many of you that have been on the committee that long are familiar with. But we cited them also not only as a refresher, but for the new folks on the committee, well, we wanted to give you the links to those studies. They're all in legislative archives. Some of them are lengthy, some of them are kind of technical, but we wanted to provide those links, and we did try to highlight some of the things that we thought were important that you might want to pull out of there as you consider this idea of what is the appropriate percentage. So unless there's questions about any of those studies or what they contain, because of the discussion that you've had this morning, I'd kind of like to open it up to any questions you might have, Mr. Chairman, we could help you with, because like I said, I think you're really ahead of the curve on this. We've merely presented some references that we thought might help you continue your discussions about major maintenance.
Okay, committee, questions? Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. It's not really a question, just a thank you to Mr. Gulida. Thanks for the information. It's really helpful. And I especially appreciate the reminder of those references in statute and committee. I think that can be really useful as we go forward and get out on the floor with any discussion regarding what kind of monies we put into the major maintenance of schools. It's right there in our statutes, and don't be afraid to fall back on that. So good reminder, George. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So the FEA study, was it the 2019 or the 2017 study that recommended the 2.15? Which one?
It was, Mr. Chairman, it was the 2016 study, but then it was referenced immediately above in the 2017 study again. So it's in either one or both of those two references. I believe it's actually in the 2019 or 2016 version.
Okay,
Yeah,
so the 2019 did
2016.
only dealt with suitability, right?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And, you know, a point on that 2.15 is that 2.15 is supposed to be the, as I recollect, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but was the optimal for 75 years. And that 2.15 needs to be attributed just to the building itself. And that's where we're astray right now, because we use major maintenance for the parking lots, for the grounds. And then we also have a portion of the major maintenance, which is attributable to security costs. And I don't know if we put that other one through. We put the other one through. What was that on? I think there was another use for it, even beyond that.
There was a reference in one of the studies, at least, about picking up the backlog of major maintenance, what that would cost to do.
Yep, that's what it was.
Deferred.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, and Senator Rothfuss, I believe part of that was also to offset enhancements. I think that was included in there as well.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And that was the other one I was trying to remember, was the enhancements, actually, in addition to the security costs. So that 2.15, when they made the recommendation based on how we do things statutorily, ended up blowing up to something like 2.75 because we spend so much on those other parameters. So I just think it's important for anyone who wasn't part of those conversations to recall that we incorporate so much into our 2% that is still short of the 2.15%, that we're really not even close realistically to the recommendation. It was around 0.6 to, if we continue to cover security and enhancements the way we do, and the grounds and everything else, is my recollection. I'd ask for any comment if I'm getting something wrong there.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's an accurate portrayal of what the studies reflected. The studies gave different scenarios at different times in different studies to either include all of these items or some of these items, and the studies tried to break down what those costs might be on a percentage basis. And I guess my thought is that if you want to pursue this in depth, because you have new members, because it's been 5 or 6 years since we've looked at some of this information, that it would be a good idea to have the consultant come in. I would appreciate getting a refresher from them. I hope you would too. And for the new members, have somebody here that can really represent their work that they did, because they invested hundreds of hours in putting together these studies for us. So we've spent a lot of money on it. But to make sure that we get that presented accurately, I wouldn't want to misstep and misinterpret the work that they've done. So, but generally, I think we're on the same page there, Senator Rothfuss.
Okay, well, thank you. So the 2.15 is not all inclusive, so that's good to know. And frankly, you know, coming from the world of construction, something 2017 is ancient history, and so I'm sure that number is certainly not even valid, not even close now, especially in this construction costs and that we're looking at today for major maintenance. So anyhow, Senator Landon.
So, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I appreciate those comments. And, you know, just not just for the newcomers, but as a reminder to those of us who have been around a while, what really prompted a couple of those studies as we went through the past few years is, what if we want to keep these buildings around for 75 years? And, you know, the honest point that I want to make is we're undershooting that mark by quite a bit. We're handing off school buildings much more quickly than that. Chances are we won't be around, but future legislators are going to be dealing with some buildings that could have lasted longer, and probably having to look at remedies and replacement and all of those issues that we face daily quicker than they need to if we don't take care of those buildings. So I appreciate Mr. Gerlaitis' suggestion that maybe it's time for us to probably take a look at that again.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman.
It's a question of pay me now or pay me later, right? Senator Office.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And one more follow-up along the lines of what the good senator was saying about that earlier report in the 75 years. That is a really good report that everyone should spend some time on, because it wasn't just a 75-year ask. You'll recall when we asked that investigation be done, we basically said, all right, consider other lifetimes for schools and try and give us an optimized answer, right? What should we be building that provides for the most cost-effective total lifetime cost of operation, basically? And that's what they came back with a few different scenarios. I think they considered 50 and maybe 60, if I recall correctly, lifetime targets, and then varied the percentage major maintenance to look at the associated costs there and optimize. So it really is the idea that the cheapest approach for the state in the long run, not just now, and certainly not now actually, but in the long run, is a 2.15% major maintenance on a 75-year building. That was the price optimized approach. And so as we pay less than that, it's important to realize that it's costing us more in the long run, right? We're borrowing from the future to save money today, and future legislatures will have to pay that back, just like we did with the Hirschler building a few years ago during the reconstruction of the Capitol, right? That was prior legislatures trying to save money at our expense when we came back and fixed it. We're doing that to future legislators right now by underfunding the required major maintenance. And I think that's an important conclusion that I certainly drew from the 16 report. And I'd ask everyone to read the 16 and 17 report if you haven't already. But I think it would be good to get FEA to kind of come back and give us any updated analysis to go over this again in detail, because it's one of the most important things we do. And we think that the new building cost is the key cost, but it's the lifetime operating and maintenance cost of the building that ends up being substantially higher. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Landon.
So, Mr. Chairman, I know we'll move on here in a second, but just, something to remember, it's not in our purview today, but we've got this whole other fleet of buildings called state buildings too, not just schools. And all of this holds true with the buildings that we are aware of. We're building one here that we hope will pay for itself in about 13 years. But it will only pay off if we take care of facilities like that so that they last a little while. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further comments, questions? Director.
Thank you. I just want to add a comment with that. And slowly you've been addressing the part of my comment, but there's still a part out there. When we have a 5-year-old and a 2-year biennium coming up, which I don't know that action will happen here, we're 7 years out on these numbers. There's 2%, whether it's cumulative or just buildings only. One of the things that we can speak with FEA on, if you'd like them to come back in a future meeting, is just an observation with me still being new here. We mothball, and then we come and ask for money, and then we demolish. And then it wasn't long ago when a new elementary school here was $15 million, and they're 28 million right now. So we're going backward in that regard, and the pay me now, pay me later, and invest in it, So I think if you decide to set a new percent of what that number would be, I think there's, cost of replacement that comes in. Not just how you got to the initial 2.15 and now it should be 3.2 or whatever the number. It also should be the percent increase of what a school is costing these days. So, thank you.
And I believe, our data is so old right now as far as assessment. I think we'll be looking at that as well. So, okay, committee, if I don't have any other questions on that topic, we'll break now for a 10-minute break. Ask everybody to come back at 10:15. Thank you.
They
Okay, committee, can we start finding our seats? Committee? Let's, okay, let's get started again, please. Everybody find their seats. Okay, do we have everybody back? We don't have everyone back, but I think we'll press on. We are online. Okay. Director, shall we move back to the update on the rule revisions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And this could be a little while, or this could be a long while. It'll be up to you all. So do we have Travis from our office ready to take over and bring up our website at this time? So what I'd like to do while we're looking, here he is. So I would like to walk you through, so if when we met in June 3rd, we talked about where we were with rules 1, 2, 3, 9, 10. We said that we were going out and doing what's been dubbed the road show on 8. We wanted district input and that we would come back and report that out. The other thing that we talked about that we were going to report out is that there were a number of districts who said they were putting some red line comments together, and the comments were from this committee that we would certainly like to see those. So that's item number 2. So I'd like to give an update on what we learned and where we went and what we heard on the road show. I'd like to walk you through some of the comments. Everything is posted and it's out there. And then I'd like to take you through where the commission currently is as of July. And then fourthly, we had some more input through a whole nother process and flow chart and what have you come afterward that we've evaluated. And then I'll try to end it without speaking for the commission or the AG, but I think what is put before the commission for September in their meeting. So there's a lot there, and we'll go slow and we'll start to step through it. So in the tab for this item, it's tab 4, page 25. And some of this is repeated and it's up on the screen, but I'd like to walk you through. So this is what is on our website. You can follow part of it on page 29. But first of all, we'll talk about page 26 as a better way of seeing what's on the screen right now. So to page 26. Okay. So what we have on the state website and what is hyperlinked over to commission's website is the regional meetings and where we went. You can see that we covered Southeast, Central, Northwest, Northeast, and Southwest, and we went around the state. We met in Wheatland, Douglas, Gillette, Grable, Riverton, Rock Springs. You'll see in there that they were attended by district representatives from these certain districts. We've color coded on that map the districts who attended these meetings. And then down below, we also had Senator Pappas, who was present for all of these through one physically, one through Zoom, with the exception of one. I believe that was a long SBC day that day, so I don't believe you joined us on that one. We've had superintendents you'll see in there, even had a board member in one of them. And so what we have done, and we've emailed this out to the districts multiple times too, is in addition to showing you where we went and who was there, if Tom scrolls over to the right side of the spreadsheet, and you might want to look up on the screen at this point, at the very top is this capacity need score. That's a presentation that's narrated that explains to the districts, and we've gone through it with the commission, what is involved in Chapter 8, what the changes are, what we're asking them to do, because this was a listening session and we wanted feedback. This wasn't, this is the way it is. So it was very important. We heard that here in June 3rd, and we wanted feedback. In that presentation, and we'll go down into some of these tabs below, they are offered to put in a % of capacity versus condition that they think best emulates their condition in their school. This is their school district and their buildings. This gets to what we were talking about with Representative Brown on when you just take these factors and it doesn't exactly present the current situation out there with the buildings. So what we heard even before the road show with a lot of meetings with districts and was confirmed during the road show is, you know, the capacities and the conditions that we had out there, the 0.65s and what have you, that they thought that they were either arbitrary in nature, they're capricious in how they got there and were set, and that they kept seeming to rise. And so therefore it felt punitive. You're trying to make sure my site does not qualify for major maintenance. And we heard that across the board. So we said, what if we took that away? And then in addition to, how do you call an 85 to 90% underneath condition low, and 90 to 95 medium, and 95 to 100? Who set that? Where did that come from? How did you determine that? I looked back as far as I could in that, and I saw the district's concern that it might have looked arbitrary or how we set that. And we said, you know what? It was a stumbling block with a lot of districts. What if we just take that off the table and we start talking about something else and how you express your school district, your building's conditions? And so in this presentation, it walks you through formulaically how to do that, what we're looking at in terms of on our end and how to set that. And then it links them to a spreadsheet database in which they can plug in their own numbers, their own school district data, and it runs itself. But would you, and there's Travis right there. So it's a small version. You can please pull up on the website, but what you have is a weighting system that's established. The districts can determine what percent based on a 3 being whole, a 1 being whole. So 30% would, a 3 would be 30%. Representative, they can plug in probably more information that you want to know here, but we'll back out of this unless they can plug in their school district sites. They can, I'm sorry, you can stay there for right now, Travis. But they plug in their school district sites, they plug in their enrollment. They can say that if for this particular school, and let's say it was ARP Elementary, we still have a lot more condition issues out there than we have capacity. And they also could do this district-wide or by school. The goal of this exercise, if you'll back out, Travis, is we're asking in the feedback form, which we'll go into in a moment, to express to us, what do you think works for your district? And so some districts, and actually just kind of hit on that. You are really fine here, Dave. Go ahead and go on in, Travis. And then go down to the pie chart you just had up there. So we had about 12 districts engaged during the roadshow, a couple of districts prior to that. We had a lot of input from them during the roadshow, but of that, just 9 represented, put in comments as to what they would do and how they would weight it and filled out our feedback form. So with the 9, we did not get the overlap that we would want on what percent. And the goal was to go back to the commission and say, because basically what you have on our website and what you saw on June 3rd is in fact the draft form of what the commission can elect to vote on in 2 weeks. And we'll talk about that a little later on. But the language they might approve to form, but it's the percent. And then that's what we're talking about right here. So we asked the districts to do was to input their information on capacity versus condition. They drop down in here, they log in, we know who they are, they fill it out. All feedback is reported out on our website and we'll show you. And it also walks over to the commission's website as well. And Travis, we can go to the pie chart. What we are trying to accomplish is be able to say the commission in 2 weeks that, you know, some number, 35 districts got back to us. A lot of them believe that they're in a 30% capacity, 70% condition, which is largely where the ones who did report back fell, or they're in a 40% capacity, 60% condition. So of the feedback that we got, and this would replace the 0.65 and what have you, I guess our recommendation or our feedback with with the commission in 2 weeks is this is where a lot of it was landing. We did step through this with them in July, and we said a lot of the information and the data points, if you add up the districts and divide it out, they're about in a 30-70, where 30% being a concern on capacity and 7% being on condition. Any questions about this part and how we got here?
Committee,
Okay, all right,
questions?
we'll go slow if you want. Okay, go ahead and pull back out, Travis. And let's show the questions that we, each chapter 8 beginning and some of the comments. So because I called this a listening session and because the commission has in final form on chapters 1, 2, 3, 9, 10, but they have not adopted, I said, when you're done with 8 feedback, why don't you drop down and give us feedback on the other ones? If it's something that is kind of de minimis, and we did have one of those, we might be able to read back in and adjust that on the other chapters before they're voted in. And then also they brought up concerns prior and during the roadshow that I said, you know, this really isn't the purview, as I understand it, of our department and of the commission, but we will be discussing with Select. And if you want to know some other things that you felt should be changed that are statutory, we will share that with them. So we'll get there in a bit and you'll see how some of the comments were either do away with value engineering or do away with it after some percent, do away with enhancements or change them dramatically. And we're just not happy about suitability. So we gave them a voice since this rides on the website here. It resides there to make those comments. And I told them that we will speak those out on your behalf, but they're really not within the purview of the department and the commission. So as we scroll down, we're asking them underneath chapter 8 first. Well, that's okay. You're already right there. We can just do that. So here's some of the 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, and 9. We had feedback from them on what their concerns were. And some of them, like this one right here, we'll walk back. We were cleaning up language of a reference to a design charrette because it wasn't in statute or anywhere else. It sort of somehow got here and existed. And we want to take that out. And we heard a district say, and another one similarly that, well, we still want to do design charrettes and we like to put that in our architects agreements. And it's nice to have something to point at in order to say, we expect design charrette out of you. And you know what? That's fine. We were just cleaning that up. But if you want that in, we'll put that back in. So that's one of those issues that we had in there. So, and I did hear overall that they were very grateful that we came out and met and that we listened and then gave an opportunity for feedback instead of we present and then they get 3 minutes at the microphone to talk about, we've never seen this before, we're not on board with this, because I've heard that happen quite a bit in the past. So, so they dropped down and gave us feedback. So that was it for chapter 1. If you want to roll down chapter 2, some of the concepts, we had some folks that there's no concerns in this area. And then under uniform adequacy standard is, I think, where some folks made the comments about this doesn't reflect Campbell, this doesn't reflect the suitability. So they have a voice in there under the other to make those comments. And that's what you would see here. And then under 9, in terms of remedies, there was a discussion about value engineering. Should it be done away with? Should it be ended at 35% and we don't come back again? There was even a pullout conversation that if this is a prototype, why are we value engineering a prototype that was prototyped and value engineered once already? So good feedback. We can address these with the district and with the committee, but it's more statutorily at this point.
Senator Office.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. On the value engineering, yeah, I was involved over the years in a number of value engineering related, we'll call it a kerfuffle, that I think probably was largely through miscommunication and confusion of what is and isn't value engineering. So things were deemed or ascribed to be value engineering decisions that were not. They were simply cost-saving measures, which is not value engineering, right? Value engineering is supposed to improve the overall cost efficiency over the project as opposed to diminish it. And so I think as the value engineering conversation goes forward, it is important to keep that so that you have somebody objectively taking a look at the project and providing engineering recommendations that will lead to lifetime operation value improvements, not just, savings today that may lead to longer term costs. And I know that that's part of what ends up driving our concern with value engineering is these anecdotes that we hear that I don't think were really ever recommended by anybody that was doing value engineering. It was just kind of attributed to them. So a bit of a commentary, and I'd appreciate your thoughts on what you're hearing there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have thoughts about value engineering. I have a lot of experience in it, and I would like this to be a more robust conversation. And even if there's an ad hoc committee of districts and to go through forward on this. I've heard value engineering being anything from some of the ways in which we employ it now to what you said. And then, of course, if it's a cost savings thing, we just lop off 30,000 square feet. So we value engineered it, now we're down within budget and you left program and what have you on the table, so what does value engineering mean, right? So I would love to explore this further. Right. And I think they're right on with these comments and in terms of us addressing these separately, and especially where's the value engineering on a prototype that's been value engineered. So I would entertain that conversation as well.
And at the also at when value engineering is appropriate. Chapter 9, I believe right now says 10 and 35%, or at the discretion of which can be, in my mind, still problematic, because if they call one at 95%, it's not valuable. But we do need to give some flexibility to the department.
Yep. Mr. Chairman, I want to follow up on that point.
Go ahead.
One of the other things that does, and it's always correct, get value engineered out, so to speak, is whenever we want to contemplate growth and design a school in such a manner that it can be added on to an additional wing later or something along those lines. So you contemplate a 2-unit elementary school that can become a 3-unit elementary school. So the first thing you have to do is design a common space that will accommodate a 3-unit school. That will never pass a value engineering muster. They're going to come back and they're going to say, no, you have to downsize your HVAC. You have to downsize all of these facilities. You don't need it for your size. And so every time we try, really, I think, at least what my experience over the past decade or so on this committee, and my colleagues that have been here for a while will probably attest the same thing. Anytime we have this aspiration to be thoughtful and forward-looking, we kill it through the final design. It never really gets there. And there might be some exceptions to that, but we don't do ourselves any favors when we try and, as we often do, minimize today's price to come in under budget at the expense, once again, of any long-term investment or future considerations. So that's another thing maybe to tack on to this conversation is let's try and be a little bit forward-looking and thoughtful.
I have to agree. It also goes not only to value engineering, but to the standards that we set for certain size schools. And for instance, I've done a school less than 10 years in Cheyenne. It's a new school, basically. I don't know how many years ago it was, 7, 8 years ago. And I actually discussed the option with the school facilities department at the time of increasing the common areas. You have to have a larger, if you're going to put in a wing on it for additional classrooms, you got to have initially a larger area for PE. You got to have a larger common area. You have to have a larger media center to accommodate a third more students. If you put make a 2-section school a 3-section school, for instance. And so that school now has modulars. It's a school that's less than 10 years old. And I knew it was going to happen because there was 2 subdivisions being built out right next to the school. So I think somehow we have to figure out how we're going to be able to get this past value engineering and past the standards when we're going to build a school for a certain amount of students, but knowing full well that we're going to have to put an addition. So now the Corps can't accept any new wings. So what do? Build a new school? So that costs even more. So anyhow,
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Landon, or Representative Landon,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Brown, excuse me.
We will get this right one of these days.
No,
Test, test.
I could hear that if you needed to know.
Okay, apparently we've, committee, apparently we've resolved our technical problems.
Yep, he's giving us a thumbs up.
All right, looks like those online can hear us and seems like the squirrels in the speaker system here have died down,
I was
so,
just gonna ask if we can come focus, but they got it.
yeah. Okay, I think we'll pick up where we left off, Director.
Okay, thank you. And do we have Travis back online with our website? All right, thank you, Travis. I think we are just ending with the value engineering comment. The one thing I was going to add to the value engineering that I would like us to be able to explore that we were thinking about when we're looking at those interesting comments about value engineering as related to prototypes, and prototypes are difficult because there's site adapts and other things involved in them. And if you're trying to do them around the state. So one of the things that we've talked about in-house and would like to explore is possibly prototyping and then therefore value engineering components of projects instead of the whole school. It's either a yes or a no. We think that that would streamline some of the value engineering type necessities. And then it also would move things closer if that roof has been a prototype and that, you know, HVAC system and things of that nature. So we'd like to discuss that with districts and see what they think. We think it would expedite things. We think that it not only would lend to the capital construction program, but would lend itself to the component and the major maintenance as well. And we might be able to kill 3 birds with 1 stone with that type of prototyping at a component level. And if there's any early comments or thoughts about that right now, I'll entertain those.
Yes, Senator Ruffus.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And I think that exploring the prototype as suggested is a great idea. But one concept that comes to mind here is based on the structure and the way that we fund, there isn't a great deal of incentive for a lot of the prototype concepts or anything along those lines for the school district, because you know we're going to fund based on model requirements and square footage, and so there's no sharing in the benefit if you adopt a prototype school and that saves us, we'll say 10% or something along those lines. The school district might just think, well, you know, what's in it for us? We'd rather have a custom school that meets our specific needs. So I think part of that discussion really should be an exploration of how we can structure it so that something good is available for the district. You might not have a complete choice in all of the design options of your school. You're saving the state some funds. And here's a reason why it specifically is helping the school district, and we're sharing in the benefit between the state and the district. So just a thought.
And Mr. Chair, I would say that to Senator Rothfuss that the very first thing that we talked about in-house is what's in it for us from a funding standpoint and what's in it for them. That was the first question that came up. And what may be in it for them, since it's currently 100% state funded system, is we're moving through a process right now of any school, if all goes well, it's 5 years before another school takes place right now. It's 2 bienniums and then some. And with some component type prototyping, and we might be able to accelerate that timeline, take advantage of construction costs before they get to be X, and also meet our needs better. So it's a conversation that I would like to have with commission, with committee, and with school districts.
Thank you. Representative Walters. Oh, okay. Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Director Vince, I really appreciate the direction you're heading with value engineering. I have maybe heard as much about that particular topic from constituents as any other topic. And I say constituents, meaning statewide. I mean, I get calls all the time on that front. I'll never forget touring some facilities down in Laramie County with Mr. Bartlett. We were just spending the day looking at facilities, and we walked by some outlet plates or something, and they had been value engineered out. And so then we end up with plates that won't withstand the pressures of school environments. And I just thought, somewhere along the way, we've got to get a handle on this value engineering component. My caution, Director, and I would really appreciate any further thoughts you have on this. When we get into component value engineering, my concern is, are we reducing our ability for competitive opportunities out there? I heard about and visited with one of our folks down in the southwest part of the state just last week, because I had received a couple of phone calls on the project in Rock Springs, and regarding some wiring that was deemed to not be the kind of wiring that we wanted. It was indicated to me from construction side of things that this would have been equally okay. It just comes off a lot of times when we value engineer these things, it comes off in a very punitive way. I'd appreciate any thoughts you have, knowing your background, Director.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Landon, I do see it that way. And I would say this, and so I'm launching this concept of component value engineering. You're like the first ones to hear this, right? So it's raw, but I think it deems some conversation. My concern, even now, with the local control component with school districts, that if they think they want Train or they want Carrier HVAC, and they have the ability to declare that, or notifier or whatever, because this is what our people know. It doesn't take long, being a former vice president of a construction company, before the contractor realizes that. And they realize that they are, in fact, your favorite, and the next door neighbor district's favorite, and the next favorite. And I don't know where the competitiveness comes from right now or not. And I don't know what I don't know. That's why I'd like to have those conversations as well. I also want an opportunity to meet with our firm that does value engineering and find out how they do it. So I want to give them that as well. Because my thought on value engineering, if I hear that we go away and come back with something, not here, but in my past, maybe it's here, it takes 3-4 months to value engineer. And it's because they're going down to the outlet, right? Instead of the 20/80 theory. What are the big ticket items that have the most money in them that we should be focusing on, instead of outlets and finishes or things of that nature? So I'd like to get into every bit of that and explore that. And I think your concerns are warranted. We need to stay competitive. In my past history, if there's a specific item, and they're going to be asked for a waiver on that, because it's proprietary. and proprietary normally was along the lines of security systems and things of that nature. And, but not everything else. That was an open market competitive. And I'm hearing that's not so much the case here. So I'm wondering what the state gets for their bang for the buck on that dollar as well.
Senator Landon.
Just a quick follow-up, and thank you, Director. I appreciate it. Just knowing the situation out across the state and region with regard to our contractors and our subcontractors and all of these businesses who have gone through where they have gone. And here we are facing more of the same potentially. I just hope that we can continue to work diligently, communicate well, really work with these subcontractors and contractors out there on issues like this. So thank you, Director.
Yes, sir. And I would share that I'm regularly on with the construction coalitions and things, and they have me speaking to like 6 items next week. I think it is in a Zoom meeting with them. And it's these concerns, it's what about, it's things like the different components. It's about the bid climate. It's about how long to hold their bids. Our contracts, I think, state 60 days, and they're saying we can't get someone to hold their number longer than 5 days before they get anxious with COVID pricing and everything. So I stay in touch with them and what their concerns are, and they're echoing what you're saying. So you're on target.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Okay, committee.
Chairman Pappas.
Okay. Senator Cost.
I'd like to step in here as well and say that I do think it's important for us to look for more commonalities in a lot of the things purchased so that we can save at the state. And even though we do believe very strongly in local control and all, I think we also have to believe in the best cost for the state. And so we need to make sure that both ways we're getting the best value for our buck. And even though some of the things might not be necessarily what a district wants, but from a money savings point, it's definitely to the advantage of the state to take it. I agree with things such as paint and wall plug-in units and all. We don't need to get into that, but other things I think that are larger cost, it's important for us to look in that direction. So thank you for doing that. And I would encourage you to continue it, even though you might get a little pushback.
And thank you, sir. And I think in the what's in it for us, what's in it for them, I think that we can look at this, and if some district can see some of the other benefits of something like this for them, value engineering component, whatever, then maybe they'll be able to move a little bit off center on most of the items being sole sourced, and maybe that works out better for everyone, contractors and the bid climate, what have you. So just to end that conversation. Okay, thank you. All right,
Great.
Travis, are you still out there? Yes, sir. Okay. Are you out there with the website, Travis? There he is. Okay, so why don't we stay right where you were, because just to let you know what else is coming up. It's in chapter 10, but we were already talking about value engineering. It's not part of the chapter 8 update, but we're stepping through this anyway. There was a conversation about enhancements and how enhancements are initiated, and what items perhaps should no longer be enhancements because, the school world has changed, things have changed. And the one that we heard the most were the artificial turf fields, and that should be a standard item now. It shouldn't, it should come with the car, as part of the wheels. And there were other enhancements in terms of how many cameras and security used to come with it versus now. So I would like some discussion in that area. This committee is the funding source, and so before we in a field for something, it seems fairly innocuous. It allows them to have more events take place on that field, which services more of the kids and the programs and things. But when you have a regular grass field that might be somewhere between $350,000 and $500,000 to install, and then you have a turf field that's around $2 million, and then on top of that, it now qualifies for major maintenance since it's not an enhancement anymore. And is major maintenance going to the building, or is it going to the fields and the parking lots and everything? It's a big conversation. It sounds simple. It just sounds like it's a field, and that makes a lot of sense to me. All the overseeding, all the use, all the whatever, it's offline. It makes sense, but there's a money ramification tied to that, and I need input far beyond me on that one, but we can do some more research and we can bring it back at another time, as well as to the commission.
Committee, any comments?
Thank you. All right, and then Travis, there, if you want to go down, this might be the section here. It's a little hard to read. I mentioned it once, but I told the districts that I would share this out on non-commission and a non-department. They're very concerned about suitability. They're very concerned about where it lands from an adequacy standard. If we talked about how to preserve a building and keep it going for the future, and yet they feel with this off the table, that there's no way to get that existing school to have the things that the new school has, and that there's an inconsistency, inequity, incompatibility there. They were able to do that in the past, or at least they saw that coming with technology and the different components of it. And now that's not there, and they don't know how to get there from here. There's a chasm in there. And that's as professional as I'll update what some of them had to say. They're very concerned about that topic. So just want you to know that it's out there and it's a big concern. And it just about overshadows everything else in all of these chapters, or value engineering, or enhancements, or the factors that we took away in the new one that's coming back in. So not going to be a lecture there. I'm just dropping that off. So thank you. Okay, can you go back out to their website, please? And we have, let's go into the feedback form, please. Or I'm sorry, the feedbacks just below that. So you can, we'll look at some of this. We can also take a look. Thank you for enlarging. Those are the districts that gave us feedback. Any click on them will tell you what their comments were. And then they also start scrolling down below too. So you can click on any one particular right here. These are the responses that received. This happens to be Associate Superintendent Dennis Holmes, who happens to be in the audience here today. And so this is the feedback. We're just trying to show you what that looks like. It's comments about Chapter 8. Go ahead and scroll up, please. And this was pretty similar to others. Remedy should be considered in either situations involving capacity condition, and should be set so that one variable does not cancel out the other, which is what we've been discussing right here. And if a school is over capacity, a remedy should be considered. If an FCI score suggests remedy, then it should be considered. So this is typical of the feedback that we got. There's some no concerns on some others. And I think we probably will see there's a value engineering in there as well. And maybe you have all of your fields already done. So maybe there's a field comment, but we definitely heard that from others. But this is an example of what we heard, how we posted it, how we're being transparent, and what the districts have to date has said. We have 9. I wish it would have been more, but we had about 12 or 13 attend. We received a lot of verbal comments from, let's say up to 15, but 9 have actually gone to the form and filled it out. Knowing that this was in July, late July, and as a former district person, I know there's other things going on in the summer, folks aren't available. Sometimes in smaller districts, the superintendent is also the facilities person. We did 2 follow-up email blasts with all this information again to all school districts saying, hey, you might have been off in July, you might have been busy, we're trying to hit you in that window before you get ready for back to school year. And but that hasn't netted any more people logging in or giving us their input. Questions about that so far?
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Vincent, I had a discussion with Assistant Superintendent Bartlett on this and kind of what do we have, when you start talking about these regions, and really that's what it boils down to. When you look at the map and who's there, you've really got a couple of larger school districts that happen to have probably one person that's in facilities as opposed to multiple superintendents, or one superintendent who happens to wear 3 or 4 different hats. So when you're doing your road show, do you specifically focus on every single one of these districts, or are you focusing in on those regions to try to reaching out to those that are actually the ones that have the capability of doing this? It seems to me that we have, those 5 or 6, or I guess it was 8, 8 people, those districts that are actually driving the force behind all this. What it looks like from the outside is that you've got 40 other school districts that don't care enough to submit comments. When in all actuality, that's certainly not the case. What they are kind of doing at this point is placing in trust their larger school district in that region to submit those comments forward. So can you kind of explain what it is you're doing when you were talking about the roadshow and some of the information that you guys had of, do you take that into account when you take these comments only, that they're the only ones written? Do you kind of think about that and how that displays over a larger geographical area?
Yeah, no, thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative Brown. So when we had a meeting with the commission in July, that was actually my concern. I said, so when I hear from 8, what are the 40 saying? Are the 40 saying we don't have enough going on out here to matter? You'll probably go through 2 more rule changes before we have a project that qualifies. Are we fine? Are we fine with the way it was? You know, it didn't need any changing. And I'm not sure we should default to that answer either. Or are we trusting, like you say, you know, the bigger districts to be able to speak for us? So my goal was to get everyone to attend, not just from a meet and greet standpoint, but I wanted to hear that firsthand. You know, the reason you didn't hear from me was, you know, because we have nothing going on out here unless it's a, you know, major maintenance or component. We were fine with the way the system was, and or, you know, we are looking at our regional larger district representative to speak for us. I don't know what that's saying, sir. That only 8 would. You know, I just had a conversation yesterday with Jeff from Laramie One, and he's like, well, what do you think this means? It's just 8 out of 40. And I'm saying, I don't know. And he says, should we ping them all again? I said, well, the one side of me is they're busy now that school year started. The other side is exactly what you just said. Maybe this isn't an issue. They're leaning on someone else, you know. And I think that we put it out there, the importance of this, that this is future projects and this is future funding. So I know you might be busy, but we're busy too. Can you get to that Zoom meeting, please, if you can attend? So I'm not sure how to analyze the other 40, you know, or 39 or 41, but I don't know what their silence means. And I would love to know what that means. So we're not making false assumptions as to why we're not hearing from them.
Okay. Thank you.
Director.
Okay. Okay, we pull that back up, Travis. So let's back out of this here. Then I wanted to go into the weighting, because I think that's what you want to hear is chapter 8. Is how this is being weighted or how it's being considered. And then we can kind of conclude with where I believe the commission is at this point, and then stand for any other questions. So the weighting. So there you go. Okay. So what we wanted to walk through with you, and it's up on the screen, is where chapter 8 is from the commission standpoint right now. Chapter 8 as drafted. Let me sure that goes strictly to chapter 8, please. And I'll just read off my prepared sheet here, if you would, if you can enlarge it on the screen. Right. So it's chapter 8 has undergone. And it's on page 3, if that's what you have there in your draft. So there it is. There it is. There it is. There's park right there in that formula. Okay. All right. You can just stay right there. Scroll down a bit more. Okay. So as far as chapter 8 goes, it's undergone significant changes from the current adopted rules. The draft of 8, you know, as provided to the select committee, you last saw it in June, and it's changed since then because of the feedback from the school districts, either prior to the road show, during, and then after. The commission saw chapter 8 after the road show. It was discussed in detail, and they did not propose any changes to it. It was a comment that I had here. We have that some of the changes in chapter 8 were directly related to Senate File 0002. Statute required the commission to prepare 3 prioritized schedules to be provided legislature. That's what we're doing with the formula and this process right here. You know, a condition of capacity and a consolidated, while eliminated entirely educational suitability as a component of the scoring. So that was the need for the change and how this is rolling out. Commission directed to prioritize the first 2 schedules accordingly, according to educational building and facility needs that impede the delivery of the prescribed statewide educational program. As I've heard before, it's been called the basket of goods, and that's what we're trying to take place here, or trying to solve. Commission's then directed to prioritize a consolidated schedule for all the school building needs, from the most critical to least critical. So that's what these formulas are doing here. So in weighing this out, and it looks tough to understand, you'd have to scroll back up to the presentation to know what the SPC and the CPC is. So if you can go to the presentation. And not the narrated one, the other one, Travis. So what was discussed with the districts prior and during the roadshow was stepping down through what we're trying to solve here based on the understanding of SF2. So you have right back up. Okay, we're just going to walk through this one by one. If you have any questions, ask. So we're just starting out saying this is the new goal here now. We have the condition, we have the capacity. We're trying to get a consolidated, and yet, as I heard in June 3rd, keep them individually separate so you can take a look at them as they are. If we scroll up. So this is the consolidated score. It's on 0 to 1. We started out with a thought when we gave them the spreadsheets that it might be 50-50. And then we thought in the spreadsheet that we sent out, we even took 50-50 off and we left it open. We just showed them an example of 0.33, 0.33, 0.33 to show them that we weren't trying to predetermine where this would go. The capacity need score in our example at this time was 0.5 to keep it simple, and the FCI was 0.5. The consolidated, go ahead and scroll up. And then right back before that one slide at a time, sir. Okay, and we're proposing a system based on those projections. Department will project enrollment 8 years into the future and use those projections to calculate the anticipated capacity needs. And then we talk about how the schedule will be ranked by projected school capacity. Any questions thus far? Okay, and then scroll up to the next slide.
Director?
Yes, sir.
How are those 8-year projections made?
Pardon?
How are those 8-year projections
Right,
made?
so I can speak to some of it, and Laura might be, since overseas planning, be able to pick up on some of that. We're missing our key people over here. Troy is no longer with us. So my understanding, I haven't been through that season yet where we do facility plans with the districts. That's that first intake from November, December until around February, where needs are brought in overall with the districts. That's how we first learn about them. And then that's how we end up looking at capacity we do every year. The facility plans by statute, we don't have to do but every 2 years. But recently we've had staff and we've been doing them every year. And then that's the beginning basis for how the project first becomes on the radar of ours from the district.
What is the data that's used for enrollment 8 years ahead? I mean, what is this district local data that's provided to you and you just use that, or are you using any outside source to determine 8 years in advance what the enrollment will be?
I know that. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I can speak to just a little bit of that because I haven't been involved in the calculations, but I can tell you that we keep historical data on what the enrollments have been, which is included as part of the facility plan, as Jerry said, where we look at, and it's done by grade and then by total by school, that it goes in and it looks at what their enrollment has been every year, and it projects out a trend. If I believe, I can't remember exactly how the formula works, but it takes a certain amount of data and then projects out a trend going forward. And we'd have to dig into the formula a little bit more. I'm not as familiar with that since I haven't looked at it in detail.
My understanding is that it starts with kindergarten and data, and then there's a survival rate that carries out, and that's how we do that into an 8-year window.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I've got a couple of comments on the 2 different topics. The first is I like the concept of looking at capacity need scores, so starting there. And I think it is important that we project and contemplate projections as we're planning, obviously. And we failed that in the future, so we would tend in that 5-year period of time to build a school and then have needs in growing communities. Even before the school's doors are open, we're behind again. So that's good. One of the challenges though with cohort survival rate is that you look at the cohort survival rate for a community, and we'll take Natrona County that we're in right now. Natrona County has a graduation rate from high school that's different from other communities in the state, and they've struggled with it. They've tried to improve it. We base a lot of our data off of the full cohort survival projected, assuming that they have similar performance in survival as you move forward. So what we literally count on, and we did this when we were restructuring the high schools a few years ago, we counted on dropout, right? We plan in our cohort survival that the dropout rate for Natrona County High School will continue at the same rate it is now, and we build schools assuming a continuation of a policy that they're trying to overcome. So that's one thing that I would just ask be considered. We don't really want to hope that the school district does not resolve its graduation problem. We want them to solve that, and we want to have schools available for a 95% graduation rate where the cohort survival actually is achieved. That is the objective of Natrona County School District 1. So that's one concern that, and this came up when we were looking at it for Laramie High School, and we were looking at it for Natrona County High School and the whole Natrona County School District remodel. So I'd give that caution that, be careful what you program to, because there's going to be some unintended consequences where we're trying to enshrine a policy that we don't want to. On the other side, one of my soapboxes for as long as I've been on this committee gets back to the aggregation of the FCI and the capacity into a common score. And since we're doing it again, I'm going to get on my soapbox again. So when I'm an engineer, when my students come in and they try to add units together where the units don't match, I tell them you can't do that. That's nonsense from a scientific standpoint. Don't add apples to oranges. Apples add to apples, oranges add to oranges. We have this insatiable desire, though, apparently, to come up with a single unified answer and one number. That unified number is not a number we should be looking at. If you have capacity problems, but you have shiny schools that are in the best condition in the universe, my schools in my district are by and large in great condition, but that won't obviate a growth trend. If we unify them into one number, it will hide the growth trend. Now, when you have a school district on the other side, you hide the other problems where I might have under capacity schools. I might be at 80% because I just had a downturn in my population for my community, but my schools are in lousy shape. And now all of a sudden, both of those two conditions come in at the 0.5. That's not a meaningful number. It's not a meaningful value. And again, my soapbox is I don't even want those added together. I don't care what your rate is in the addition. If you've got a capacity problem, honestly, that's a constitutional problem. That has to be solved. If you've got a critical condition problem where we know that you've got potential for health and safety, that's going to be a constitutional problem that has to be solved. If you don't achieve that level, then we can look at it and it's sort of like an orange or a yellow, a warning kind of thing. We are sophisticated enough not to need to add those numbers together. And I think we should have critical needs and capacity identified and red flagged and brought to us. We should have critical needs in condition flagged and brought to us. And those should be our highest priority. And we vet them out and we wrestle with them. So again, I know that we're trying to add them together and come up with one, but it's that concept of, if one of my foot is standing in ice water and the other foot is standing in a fire, on average, I'm doing fine. I'm afraid that we're moving down that path once again. And so there's my soapbox for the 12th time. maybe.
Thank you, and Mr.
Yeah.
Chair.
Director,
so-
any comment?
Yeah, so he's right. But the fact is that SF2, required consolidated. So what we're trying to do is work within the structure of that law and still break out exactly what you're talking about. If you have a foot in the fire and it's in condition, then let's take a shot at that. It's 90% weighted, for example, instead of the 10% that's in the ice because you're fine on your capacity. That's what we are trying to achieve within the structure of that Senate bill that was passed. But we understand, and as a former district person, I very much understand what you're saying.
And quick follow-up. It's in SF2 because I lost last time in trying to convince everybody of the same thing. Just to be clear.
Stay with the soapbox. Don't give up.
Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the good senator from Laramie. Makes a lot of sense. I can only say that I think part of the sentiment on this committee and on into the legislature itself was to try to get from our state construction department a list that best represents what we have going on out there. The more subjectivity that we can take out of things, the better it seems to be when we go in and amongst the 90 that make up the decisions with regard to what money we're going to spend. And so I do get where the senator's coming from. I realize that combination list is probably going to be our commission's. I'm looking back at Mike there. It's going to be the best guess that we can put together. I don't think we're ever going to be able, Director, and maybe you can comment on this. We're not ever going to be able to get all the subjectivity out of this effort to take care of this fleet of schools, are we?
I don't see how that, Mr. Chair, I don't see how that occurs. I don't think you're gonna get all the subjectivity out. I thought that before we went to the commission in July, we were doing great things by taking those factors and everything out because there was so much subjectivity that were involved in theirs. I thought by giving 48 districts an opportunity to talk about the percent that works for them, that we might be coming back to the commission in September with there's a unanimous, they all lined up perfectly. It's a 30-70, a 70% weighting. If it turned out there were two sets and analyze why, if it was small versus large, if it was rural versus urban, then we might recommend a two-tiered one where there's this for these kind of districts, whatever you want to say, a 20-80, and these other ones were a 40-60. I was hoping that we'd come out with something that would be less subjectivity, that would be driven by just one or two components of it that were put forth by the district instead of us and consultants, what have you. So I thought we were heading down that road, but I don't know that you're going to eliminate all of it. And then we get back to Representative Brown's comment. I don't know what 8 comments mean out of 40. So I guess I would like to know more about that, and so I know chapter 8 is near and dear to this committee compared to the rest of the chapters.
Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director. Appreciate that. I have a specific question within chapter 8, and maybe we're going to get to this, and if so, that's fine. We can visit in a few minutes. I wonder what the advantage is of specifying single schools versus districts. In the past, we have generally kind of looked at remedies from a district level as we sit at the state level. And it looks like in our rules, we're moving to a school by school evaluation. Am I reacting wrong to that? I just read this, I think, yesterday. And if I'm mistaken, maybe you can clarify for me.
Mr. Chairman, before he answers, can I add to that question?
Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Director. My additional question would be the same thing, but for grade configuration. Back to the good senator's point of typically we had always looked at these from a district-wide perspective, and now we have a configuration and a school number that's going to play in there. And so just a little more understanding of all of that, in addition to the good senator's question.
Director.
So sure, Mr. Chair, I will try to answer those questions. They're questions, I'm going to be honest with you, that I've struggled with since I've got here. When you're a former district person and it looks like we have, a Mercer or least cost effective remedy. And it says, well, you have a school way over on that side of town. And it still has some seats. Let's just get another driver. Let's get another bus. Let's just send everyone over there. So when you're trying to solve this at a district-wide level, it brings up challenges that districts have internally. So when you're trying to solve them within an attendance area, some have a triad. It gets into where we're going to be able to solve everything. I believe your district is an open enrollment type district, and then yet others are in a triad and others are not. So what I've struggled with as a former district official is when we say you should solve in a non-construction way, and maybe the school over there is currently a 5-6, but the school that is having capacity issue right now is a K-12 or something. I feel, and as a department, I'd like more conversation on this, that we kind of kick the can back at the district and how they solve that non-construction remedy, and that it's very clear, those words are very clear, but there's a lot more behind that and how you actually operationalize that and do that. And so I struggle because I'm speaking as the state and I've been the district, and the way we direct them to solve things within the district-wide capacity they have right now are probably not feasible in some cases. So I don't know how effective it is to do that Mercer for $100-some thousand, and that's the answer that drops out of the bottom of the bucket, to be honest.
Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd follow up and say that most other states are funding their school capital construction different than we do in Wyoming, because we fund it on a state level and most others fund it on a district level. And so if a district in another state is willing to tax itself higher to build more schools and various configurations, that is one thing. But where the state is paying for all of this, in my mind, it is the state saying, we are willing to give you these resources, but you need to, within your district, have the control to utilize these resources to the best way possible. And just because you choose to operate in a certain system, a certain configuration, that is your choice as a local district, but it is not the state's responsibility to now come in and build you more facility, more square footage, because you have made a local decision as to how you want to configure your district. And that's why, in my mind, the district-wide is the most fair across large districts and small districts alike, because it says, because the state is the one paying. The state is the one building these facilities. And so a district could theoretically go in and segregate their schools down and configure their schools down to a level that we would be building 10 new schools in every district just to meet the district's demand or district's needs based on how they have chosen to structure their district. And that just doesn't work when the state is the one footing the bill. I think it works very adequately when it's the local district and the local voters footing the bill for those things. That's why I see concerns with these Chapter 8 rules, where we're putting that configuration as well as that school by school component into the formula. I firmly believe it needs to stay at the district level to keep all of our districts the same, the big ones, the small ones, rural, urban, all of that equalizes out when you leave it at a district level, because it says the state will provide you the resource district, figure out how to work within the resource the state has provided.
Yes, and Mr. Chair,
Would you agree?
thank you. And that's the struggle right now. District-wide seems to be, when you're rolling out equity to 48 districts, the best way to take a look at that. The choices for open enrollment and triads and what have you. You're right. If someone decided the best way to teach is to have a school just for first grade and then second and third and fourth and all that, and therefore we need 20 new schools. So we're hearing that. So what you see in Chapter 8 right now is a response to districts in a number of ways. The feedback, you're right, Senator Landa, this is reading that it's a building type remedy. It's not a district-wide remedy. That was something that was put forth from what we heard. We talked about it in-house, talked about with the commission. And then the other key things that we heard from them was, the ability to take out some of the subjectivities, other formulas and factors like that. So it is currently keyed on building right now. Yes.
Senator Landon.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to the former chairman's points, I think the concern through the years, Director, has always been, for lack of another term, I don't like this term, but I can't come up with another one. What would keep a district from gaming the system that way? If you go to a building by building, we could set aside a building and just put it in a condition and a situation where this committee and our commission would have no choice but to roll in and take care of a specific building within a district. And that could be simply because we have decided to put all our resources in the other buildings in the district. And I think that's the concern of this panel through the years. I can't speak for this today, but through the years, the concern has been that. So that's my caution. Thank you.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I don't want to belabor the point a ton, but I'm going to slightly respectfully disagree with the former two chairmen of the committee, because really what we're talking about here is ultimately the larger districts. We don't really see this problem with the smaller districts at an issue where they're going to attempt to quote unquote game the system. And I think that's a tough situation. And frankly, I've had this discussion with my school district as well as the department on this. You know, I can see that happening in a larger district, but what we also do, at least in my 5 years in the legislature, is we say local control. We give this idea of local control, local control, local control, but then we say, well, hold on, you can't have local control because we're paying for it now. And that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. These school boards are elected, and we have tossed to them the responsibility of designing the school district that they believe is the best fit for their children as they grow up. And so, you know, in my community, I personally don't want to see a child bust for 45 minutes across town because I have capacity in one school but not the other. And that's exactly what would happen. We would have a 30 to 40-minute bus commute to solve that capacity issue. And when you sit down and you talk with my school district and you hear those dynamics, this building by building situation, while it could be a gaming system, I trust our school boards are not going out there and purposely coming to this committee and coming to the school facilities division, trying to get more than what is actually needed. I've had that discussion multiple times where you look at Laramie County 1, I think is 97% capacity to the buildings that are existing. They built a new school 10 years ago, and within months of that school opening, it was already over capacity. So, you know, it's one of those things that it sounds good when we talk about it, but I think we have to be careful to think about the school board has been elected in that community to represent the needs of that community. And they have chosen to set this design up. And it's frankly, it's going to be in the larger communities, the 5 or 6 larger communities in the state that we have this issue. And so I think while it's worth the discussion, I want to be cautiously optimistic here that our school districts are not gaming the system, that there is something that is occurring out there that is happening because the community has spoken in that fashion. So nothing, again, no harm, no foul, I hope, and I hope no offense was taken here, but it is something that is near and dear to my heart and something in my community that we have seen held against our school district. In the formation of a new junior high school a few years ago, it was told to us, you know, back and forth that, well, you really don't need the capacity. Well, when you look that I have to ship somebody from the north side of town and it's a 40-minute bus commute, I really don't want to be bringing somebody from the north side of town to the south side of town just because I have an extra 6 seats on the south side of town. So just my 2 cents. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Walters.
Thank you. And I think the good representative really makes my point even more clear, and that is, and it will come out affecting the small districts because of the actions of the large districts. We have a limited amount of dollars available to do things. And if a large district, through configuration and through school by school analysis, decides they need or feels they need more capacity because we have used a school and a configuration capacity as part of that formula, those larger districts are going to eat up all of the available state dollars. Remember, folks, this is state money. This is not local money. They will eat up all of those dollars to where that small district within the state that only has one high school, one grade school, one middle school, whatever, that's falling to the ground, can't even get it replaced because of the actions of the large district, because the large district, and through these rules, using school by school and configuration abilities, it becomes subjective. And so then they will eat up all of those resources. And that's why it affects more than just the big districts. Yes, the larger districts have the ability to, or have more schools, more high schools, more middle schools, more grade schools. However, if they use all of the available dollars, which are a finite resource, then those small districts get left out in the cold. And that's why this system has worked so well, because in Wyoming, we are unique. We provide this on a statewide basis. This system has worked well to go by entire district assessment of capacity. And that's the main reason, because it has to be capacity across the state so that it equals out. Otherwise, I'll say it again, those large districts will chew up every bit of available funding if we go down to this configuration and school by school basis. And there is still a 100% local control in that the locals decide how to use the resources provided by the state. That's totally on a local basis. The state is not dictating to them, structure your system with 5, 6 classes, structure your schools with 1 through 3 schools, with all of that is locally driven. The state is simply saying, here is the amount of resources we're able to provide. Now, please, within those available resources, do the good things for the students of Wyoming. That is where the local control comes in. And so those would be my comments. These rules, because of that configuration and school by school analysis, these rules are very concerning to me. And then the other point, I'm going to step on to the next subject. When you do, and really would like some discussion from the director on this, the elimination of for capacity, and I'm just going to use the capacity as my example, they do the same in the FCI, but you eliminate saying 100% is high capacity, 90 to 100, or 95 to 100 is medium, whatever. My question is, at some point we have, and FCI is a 0.65, but the question will be the same here. At some point we have to draw the line in the sand so the districts know, where are we going to start being concerned? Whether it be the FCI or whether it be capacity, are we going to get really concerned because you're over capacity? Are we going to get really concerned once you're at 110 or at 90? When do we show we're concerned? And yes, I think those numbers are random, fully agree, and that's fine. But at some point we have to be able for them to look and say, okay, we know we've hit this benchmark. Now we're going to start to act. And so what is that benchmark? And that's what, to me, these numbers really delineated is this is where we're going to start to take action. And without a number in the sand, no one really knows. Is 50% capacity where we're going to start looking at rebuilding a school? No one knows, because we've eliminated where do we start to see concern. Is an FCI score of 25 versus 0.65 where we start to worry. And I guess, so that's my question. Why eliminate that goal out there, or that view of knowing when do we start to take action? Director.
Okay.
Thank you
Mr.
for the
Chair, yeah.
latitude, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. So one thing is the formula and the methodology that's being presented supports both competing views depending on how you rate it. Either be done by the building or done by the district. So I don't know that the formula is throw it out and start over again. It's just where's that space? Where's that place that we land in between on this? So the formula can be used either way. I haven't heard the perspective before on that's our benchmark. That's how we know how bad we're getting. So that's a good point. And I guess I would just roll to where I believe we're going to end this. An update and feedback from the committee has us going back to the commission in 2 weeks to say, here's what we heard, other than our commissioners who are already here. And so let's talk about that. Let's talk about the concerns of the committee. And then based on that, we have this sitting as an action item until the gavel pounds on all of it. So what might happen at the commission, if they choose, is to say, we hear concerns still from the districts. We certainly are hearing the concerns of the committee. Why don't we push all of the chapters except 8, and let's have, you know, a more robust conversation. So right now it's teed up where they could take it in whole. They can take it all at chapter 8, and then we can take this input here and bring it back and present it to them as a full commission, and we can have that conversation with them. So that's really where we're trying to go with this.
Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Director, thank you for the opportunity to have a good discussion today. I think that represents a lot of the years I've been on the committee. It's a tough call. I would just ask that the commission consider the following. If you take too many of those benchmark kinds of indicators out of your rules, ponder the notion of, does that make it more difficult for us on the money side of things to push through certain lists of prioritized capital construction projects? Because what we get out on the floor of the House or the Senate is colleagues who come up and say, well, how do I know if this is a building that I should be voting for? It's tough enough as it is. You can imagine, you know, no matter what that list looks like, it is a battle every year for us to go out on the floor and say, it is time for Tinsley. It is finally time that we get on board and go hard at Laramie County. Or what about Teton? And what we rely on a lot of times, Director, is this ability to say, well, they hit a benchmark. They hit this point and we don't have a choice. We've got to get on. And so maybe that's helpful. And I would value any feedback from the commission as we go forward. But yeah, thank you.
That's very valuable feedback for me. I don't have all this historical that you have. So yeah, you guys are schooling me, you're educating me. So thank you very much.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And getting to the kind of aggregate score that's required and reflecting on Representative Walters' discussion about kind of the criticality, there's nothing, I think, in that legislation, as I recall it, that requires that it just be a composite or an aggregate or an addition, but there has to be some sort of a unification of the scores. And the criticality that Representative Walters is talking about might well be the model for coming up with a unified score, which is almost more of an or statement. But at what capacity are we going to call it, you know, red zone? Is it over 100%? Well, once you get over 100% of capacity, you can probably start saying you've got some constitutional issues. So that should raise a flag, and that can be reflected in a unified score. You've got a flag raised. This is critical. So maybe that rates a 1 of some sort. And then on the condition side, you know, and if you're projecting that within 3 to 5 years or whatever the case may be, it will go over 100%, then maybe that's the next level of scoring for capacity. So coming up with a criticality system on capacity and providing some context for what that capacity means can provide some insight. On condition score is the same type of thing, where if you're, and we know this, that if you've got the health and safety issues, now you're critical. If you've just got things that need to be fixed, you're at a lower scale. And focusing on trying to get to the point where you can identify through your aggregate system what the highest priorities actually are and list those out. So I think there are ways that are more elegant than simply putting a weighting factor and adding the two variables together can be incorporated to achieve a list that prioritizes all of them, where those that look unconstitutional circumstances end up rising to the top. And I would encourage, as the commission then is looking for input for the next meeting, that looking to alternatives to pre-factors in addition in coming up with that, I think would be certainly, it would go a long ways towards accomplishing the discussion that we've heard both from Representative Brown and from from Representative Walters here. So there's my ask.
Thank you. Mr. Chair and Senator Rothfuss, thank you for that. So we have a quick turnaround before, well, we'll meet with the commission in 2 weeks and we will share out this information and then we see you again next month. But there's leeway in how we can put that list together. We can have thresholds, we can have tiers, we can do those kind of things within this system. So we don't feel like we're giving control away and that we're trying to meet something without busing someone 70 miles away. So there's some things we can do inside that. We just got to get to work. We got to get going on it because it's a very short turnaround time.
Any other comments? Okay. Are we?
And that's it. So that's where we're at with the overview of 8, which led to the detail of 8 and what we learned and didn't learn out on the roadshow. What we'll take back and share with the commission and then see what we can prepare and bring back for the select to take a look at in October. So I'm seeing and hearing for our schedule that we had posted on the website. If you hadn't seen what we put up there, we cut short just before we got there. We left ourselves a window for input and a window for dialogue between committee and commission. So we were prepared to have the, if you may recall, our department was ready to present everything to the commission around May. I just got here in April, hadn't even lived here until June. I said, can I get on board with this? You know, what if we don't do it for 6 more years? I like to know what we're talking about. And then I asked for a June, and in June, I got the idea and heard from districts already that, you know, we'd like something a little bit different. So put the road show together. Commission, can I, you know, beg your indulgence on July, listen to what we said in June and said, where do you think you are with this commission in the July meeting? So we can get input from select. If input comes back with something other than what's being proposed or put forth, we had in September to discuss it, in October back to you. Commission doesn't meet in October, but they meet November 2nd. So there would be time to take this out and land it on commission, you know, gaveling this down on November 2nd, I believe it is. And then a 45-day clock and public hearing starts ticking from there. So we built space in there to make sure that districts knew they were being heard and weren't just cutting them off, and also said you could be heard and commission could be heard. So it was all planned into the timeline.
Well, I know they're just to be clear, committee, that you know, these rules and regulations are are the work of the commission, and we are offering input, but ultimately they have the say, and they will decide as best with our input. And certainly we have seen almost all the chapters except 8, and we have seen a little bit now at 8. It's still not fully complete, but as I discussed with the director, there's actually 3 possible ways forward. And I would like to, for you discussed one of them. Please reiterate that one and then
Yeah, sure.
give the
Thank you,
3
Mr.
possible scenarios so we all understand.
Yeah, so 2 might be going down into one. Now, one scenario is that the commission could say, well, thank you very much for this input. But the strikeout version, as is on the website right now, can go forward in September. They may say that they want to move forward on all the other chapters with the exception of 8. And we want to have some more dialogue with that. And what the full commission is not aware of yet is after the July meeting, a group of districts put a whole nother model together to say, what about this? And we've looked at it and analyzed it the last couple of weeks, but the commission's not aware of it as a group. And that was going to be discussed with them. So the third could be, you know, approved a form. It could be pull it back and let's have some more dialogue with the select and the districts, and then just take everything but 8. And it could be, we like a couple of things in this new method that was presented to you at the state. So it could be any of those 3.
Yeah. Okay, so
Right.
committee, are we clear?
Okay.
On the way forward?
Okay.
Okay.
And may I cover just one more item on here? We don't want to be remiss. Page 27 regarding rules. under tab 4. In the June 3rd meeting, we had said that there was a group of school districts. I think they were calling themselves a cohort now, and that they were going to do a full markup and present it. And so the comment that from the committee here, I believe Senator Rothfuss might have been others, I'd sure like to see a copy of those red line comments. So as we prepared for the commission meeting in July, we met with them and they said, now that you're doing these listening sessions, because that was a thought like from the April, May timeframe, before I got here. Now that you're doing listening sessions, now you're doing the roadshow, we feel that what we were trying to say can be better accomplished collectively and feedback form and website through this process. So they sent a letter to the commission and about because they were awaiting red lines in July, but there was no red lines. And we just incorporated that letter in here for you guys to just kind of bring that to closure, that there's not a set of red lines that would be coming in. And as they've spelled out here, they'd like to follow this process that we're covering right now.
Yeah. Senator Rothfuss, I think that was you're good with that, right?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this topic committee, anything? Okay, so we do have one topic left in our questions, and then I'll open it up for all of them to be for public comment. But Ms. Anderson, would you take us home on the Fremont District 25 school auditorium?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So that is in tab 6 on page 43 of your booklets. This is the requirement in section 313 that was put into the budget bill that requires the state construction department to submit an application for section 604 COVID funds for the ARP funds that we discussed earlier. In our last meeting with you in June, you were going to repeal that section if you had a special session, but that did not happen. So we will still be submitting an application. However, also, as we discussed earlier, I have no application process to submit. So we're trying to be a little proactive. We've been working with the district to come up with a story on what is their need and what is the story of their auditorium. Nobody knows those buildings and their stories like the districts do. I certainly would not presume to know what they know or what their intent is or what their desires are. And so I reached out to Superintendent Flanagan, which she is actually sitting here in the audience today, if you had questions for her. She provided me that narrative, so I've got everything ready to go as much as I can in anticipation of those applications opening up. And when they open up, we'll submit an application.
Okay. Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to put this out there that we do recognize that this is basically an act in futility, correct? That we have almost zero chance of doing this. We are simply asking the state to do this with the limited resources that you guys have because we have it in law. Therefore, you shall. Is that correct?
That is our understanding at this point. From what we do know, there's a specific section that is on the page here that you have to directly tie the project directly to a need from COVID. And as this project at the auditorium has been going on for, I believe, district, correct me, I believe it's like 30 years they've been working on this. I'm not sure that we can tie that directly to a COVID event. And so it would be a very difficult sell to get that through the application process.
Thank you.
Any chairman? Okay. All right. Committee, any other final discussions on any of these points before I open it for public comment? Senator Cost? No? Okay, great. All right. Thank you, Director and Ms. Anderson. We'll now open this to public comment. First, I'd like to ask if the commissioners have any comment on anything that we've heard. Please feel free. You don't have to, but feel free to comment if you'd like. I'd like to give you the first opportunity. Commissioner Gilmore, please. Thank you.
Well, actually, I don't know why I walked up here. I don't have anything at this time, but
Okay.
I can say that kind of a follow-up is we strive to do everything as local as possible. I know there's quite a bit of discussion about district-wide. And the other thing, as a commission, and I can't speak for the whole group, but we really seem to care when the districts tell us their needs. And the small districts like you guys were saying, there's 7 or 8 that always seem to respond. And we as a commission got together and ordered our previous director and our new director, when we have an opportunity to find out what they're thinking, do everything you can to get the feedback. I mean, if you have to make 48 phone calls, talk to each superintendent and say, we really would like to hear from you. So I gotta say that our new director has done that and stepped forward, and I don't know that answer. Is someone really just ignoring it, or they don't need something? And that's a really hard one to pinpoint. And I know listening to it, I was thinking, I've been on this commission for going on 6 years now, and there's just some districts that show up at every one of our meetings and with concise request, and then there's other that never show up. So we're out there and we're available.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, now it's open, Mr. Holmes, please come forward.
Good afternoon. Dennis Holmes, Associate Superintendent, Campbell County. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. I need to say how thankful I am for the process and the conversation that's taken place today as well. And there's some things I agree with and there's some things I don't agree with, but it's the conversation. And that's the one thing I was thinking. Mr. Bartlett, myself, and several others have been working with Mr. Gilmore and the commission for nearly 2 years now on this. And ultimately, the conversation continues to get better. And that's the encouraging part of what's taking place right now. And, you know, I certainly have my own opinions and reflections that, you know, benefit the people I serve. But I always try to think that those are universal thoughts and representations, not just self-serving. And I really appreciate and value the thought of having a condition score and a capacity score, and having those scores independently reflect the needs of the buildings that house the students that we educate throughout the state. And I certainly understand and respect the funding model and how that is, you know, distributed and whatnot. But I also believe that in creating a capacity, in creating a building condition score, that you're not going to game or misappropriate. That you're going to be concise with the needs of the district, because ultimately, for myself and 47 others, we have 5, 7, 9 board members that are putting the stamp of approval on it, knowing that we're making solid ethical, moral recommendations and that they're being supported by those people that ultimately support me. So, but I continue to appreciate what's taking place. I know our July 13th meeting was very good conversation, and some of it was conversation that the two sides, so to speak, didn't agree on, but that's okay. We can agree to disagree. But the big thing for me is we can have the conversation. I would also say that the benefits for Campbell County is Director Vincent and his team was able to tour some of our facilities as well too, which was very helpful for us. So would be happy to answer any questions. But again, I thank you for the difficult conversations, because just as a member in the audience, I can see that sometimes it's tough to bring stuff up, and I appreciate that. So thank you.
Committee, any questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Holmes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Mr. Bartlett, please come forward.
Mr. Chair, committee members, thank you for the time. Dave Bartlett, Assistant Superintendent for Laramie One. I too, I appreciate Senator Roth's comments about the not adding apples and oranges to come up with the score. And as we have, myself and about 5 other districts have gotten together, and as Director Benson has mentioned, we're trying to come up with kind of an alternative method to what they've proposed. And really what we're looking at is, can we come up with something that really truly does point out a poor condition building that may not be overcrowded, or an overcrowded building that may not be in poor condition, you know. And I appreciate the conversation of the big district versus the little district. You know, Laramie One, we've got 50 facilities, and so actually I've got brand new buildings that are overcrowded, and don't necessarily believe that we are gaming the system. You know, we are one of the few districts that are showing population growth. We've got multiple subdivisions planned or in progress, anywhere from 850 to 2,000 homes throughout Cheyenne. So as we look to rebound and we build new schools, they're going in those new neighborhoods. My older neighborhoods that have those schools from the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, poor condition or overcapacity, we still have the obligation to make sure that we're addressing them. So hopefully as the conversation continues, and I agree with Mr. Holmes, we've had great dialogue with the department. You know, I'm fortunate in that Director Vincent's not too far away, and some days I think he probably feels unfortunate that he's so close to me. But we have had great conversation, dialogue, kind of brainstorming, sharing ideas. So I do hope, again, that this conversation moves forward. I have been fearful of the percentage of waiting things. You know, as Director Vincent said, throughout the community, if you're in a declining enrollment period, you are really looking for a model that accentuates poor condition. If you're growing, you're wanting to go the other way. And ultimately, I have buildings that have needs in both ways. I've got, we talked about our elementary. It's 158% capacity, and it's on a high needs on the list. But right below that, I have Saddle Ridge Elementary that has 3 modulars. It's 5 years old, and 500 homes planned just to the east of it. So again, whatever we can do as the districts to help support this move forward, we want to make sure and continue to be at the table and help. When we look at Senate File 2, as this has come through 2115, 117, it was a little surprising. Senator Lannon, you spoke to the fact that we've always looked at district-wide capacity, but the new language does say a consolidated list for building condition and a building schedule for condition, a building schedule for capacity, and then a consolidated list. So that language in 2115, 117 really changed our thinking, and why we started to try to formulate a different approach that would help as well. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Dave, can you tell me, I know that you've got a kind of a new model that you had just presented to Representative Land and I just last week. Are you intending to present this to the commission at their next meeting? What's the plan? Because it may change their thinking.
Sure. So Mr. Chair, that would kind of depend on additional dialogue with the director. I believe probably a week ago, Friday, we sat down and had probably an hour and a half, 2-hour meeting with the director and their staff. The director actually gave us some insight and thoughts, which then on Monday, we got back together and started rethinking. I think that's the model we shared with you, where we were actually looking at the variance of being over capacity and the variance of how high you are over a cut score of what condition would be. And we've not had the opportunity to sit down with the director and share that yet. I think he was a little busy preparing for today. But our plan would be at the point in time we would share it with him. And we've actually, originally we had only Laramie One data because that's all we had that was clean data. We've had 5 other districts kind of share. So we've kind of got this pooled spreadsheet going. So we do plan to share it with the director, and then we'll let him take it forward if that's his choice.
Well, I encourage you to do that. I mean, every option that we can look at, maybe a potential solution. And it may get to the point where, it's actually a better option. It'll get back to a more, a number that would be, this variance number may be the key thing that you're looking at to be able to balance the difference between the two parts of the equation, right? The capacity and the facility score. So again, I don't know as much about it as you do, but I encourage you to do that, and the commission may listen to you and they may not. It's their prerogative, I guess, but it's another option out there, and I think it's important to explore all options. Senator Land.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I appreciate your comments. Mr. Bartlett, thank you, and I probably unfortunate that I used the word gaming. We have beautiful, wonderful districts, and I've been on this committee a long time, and our districts don't game any system or anything. My caution was more to the fact of whatever we set up, I think we want to be careful that we set it up in a good, tight, and appropriate way, because what we've got to do as legislators is we've got to take it to the appropriators. And they've got to have full confidence that whatever we're presenting, it's ironclad and it's there. We're in a position, I think, for example, right now to help Laramie District 1. It's time. We've got some priorities there. I hate to see us shift and go in an entirely different direction, which might distract us or get us off track from where we've been. But I also want to say I'm willing to look at change. We can always do things better. So I just wanted, Mr. Chairman, to make sure everyone realized that I shouldn't have used the word gaming. I just want to be cautious as we go forward because we've got to go out and sell it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Bartlett, any other comments? Are you good?
No, thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Any further public testimony out there? Superintendent Flanagan, please come forward. Would you push your button, please?
I'm Joanne Flanagan, the superintendent for Fremont 25, and I have Ted May here with me, my grounds and maintenance director. And I just want to thank you all for the opportunity to speak, and also would like to thank the State Department here on helping put together the application for the ARPA funds. And so as Representative Brown mentioned, we're not holding out any hope that the ARPA funds are going to resolve our issue for funding our auditorium. And you have the letter, I think, in the packet that I presented. So I'm not going to spend a lot of your time rewording that here today, but just here to really speak on behalf of the district, our kids, and our community. And to ask for support from this committee moving forward to commit to state funding, to work to get state funding committed, I should say, to this project. The letter spells out sort of the path we've been on in our attempt to try to get this auditorium piece for our kids brought to fruition. And twice we've been approved, twice we've been funded, and twice we've lost that funding. And while I appreciate the efforts of the legislators to try to find a creative funding source through ARPA funds, again, I don't believe that's going to hold any kind of water. I've been working with Esser funds for the last year and a half and don't believe it will meet the requirements. So I'm just asking for this committee to support at the state level some committed funding from the state to get this project in place. At this point, I believe it's an equitability issue. I'd like my kids to have the same opportunities that kids across the state have. And we're just unable to provide that for them and have been unable to provide that for them for many years.
Thank you. Committee, any comments?
And
Yes, Senator Rothfuss.
I was apparently already able to speak, so that's probably not good. Thank you for those comments, and I just was going to ask if there are any updates with regard to project costs, with regard to project planning, anything else that we should be contemplating. I certainly understand, and I appreciate honestly the effort to try and get some ARPA funds for it. But anything else that we should kind of know about the costs, planning, timeline, anything along those lines that would be helpful?
Mr. Chairman, Senator
Superintendent.
Rothfuss, we have at this stage, and Ted, feel free to weigh in. We have not put any design pieces in place, nothing at this point, because we're really waiting on the commitment for the funding. I believe that 10 years ago, was it about 10 years ago, we did some initial planning?
Well,
Ted, is that correct?
Yes, and then there was some pre-planning with the department to move forward with this as far as what size the square footage that we're looking at, size of the seating. So that particular part of it has been done, a very minor
Yes.
first step as far as planning.
And Mr. Chair, I would say that one of the great things about the roadshow in addition was I was able to meet school districts and walk the projects and walk the specific one. And what we went over is they're at from architecturally, that's a schematic. We have a schematic on where it would drop, where it would go, and where the big grass open area is and how it would tie itself in, because there's some elevation changes to the existing building. So when you go beyond schematic, you start paying an architect, and that's when they need money, need to get it going. The second point to what the superintendent said, we will give her a letter to the LSO to give to you. It wasn't included in the packet because the topic was ARP and an ARP update, and the superintendent one more time reiterated the 40-year story of why this is a need. And so it wasn't under the ARP, but we don't want you to believe there's something that wasn't in the packet, so we'll share it out. Okay.
Yes, Senator Rothfuss.
I'm curious if this project would count under the way we've structured the concept of a component as a component funding as opposed to as a new build funding. Does it meet that definition, or is the definition too restrictive?
Currently, it does not, is my understanding through Paul, our design and construction administrator. It does not meet that criteria. It doesn't mean that couldn't be changed by you all, but does not meet that. Little too big.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And that was what I was getting at. I wasn't sure. And is that statutory or is that rule? Do you know?
My understanding is it's statutory.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just with a little latitude, just a quick general comment. Really appreciate District 25 being here. I made a motion a couple of years ago on this front to move this project forward. And for the newcomers on the committee and for all of us, I would just say that Riverton is one of those last schools that did it on their own. This was not funded by state money. That it's a beautiful school. They've taken good care of it. But we've talked about value engineering. I think that's one of the things that got value engineered out of that school, regrettably, because it's the kind of school that really needs to have that project. So that's why it's been on the table of select committee. I've used the analogy of us taking a wagon train on the Oregon Trail, and we've had to drop a couple of things off along the way. We finally made it to a nice little valley with some water in it, and we've gotten condition up to speed, we're capacity up to speed, and we can go back and get the piano that we dropped off on the trail back there. This is one of those projects that's kind of like that. It's just one of those that's been around a long time, and it would be nice, Mr. Chairman, if we could push it on through. So thank you.
Yeah, well, I believe, our discussions from the last meeting was that we were certainly very, very committed to see this thing continue on. So I think that's the sentiment of the committee.
Yeah.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. One final comment on it, and along those lines, and with Senator Landon, I was part of that motion a few years ago, and I support that as barring any health and safety expenditure need or something along those lines, where we just have to prioritize it. This seems to me like it should be our highest priority because we've made a commitment to move this forward. And if there's one thing that I've found frustrating over the years of being on this committee, it's when we start pushing a project forward and then we don't continue to back it and we switch. we change our mind. So this should be, in my view, the highest priority we put forward barring any health and safety requirements.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Who's,
Okay. So I
Director.
stand, thank you. Our staff is helping me out. I stand corrected. It's not statutory that an auditorium could come in, but it does, as a component, it must be major maintenance related. So it doesn't come in from that direction, but it's not statutory, where the default is just like you did with Penn Sleep, or you just mentioned, if you feel this is something that needs to take place, you can move it forward.
Just do it.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Landon.
Thank you. Just real quickly, Director, is this a specific topic to be discussed by our commission in the next meeting, or where do we stand from your standpoint on the auditorium up in 25?
It is not on the commission's agenda for any time in the near future. We actually ended this with, I believe, June commission talking about how it didn't qualify for, ARPA funding. And I believe that's where I recall we ended this thing in June. It hasn't come back up again.
Senator Landon, do I hear a recommendation?
Well, Mr. Chairman, given that answer, I just feel the same way that the senator from Albany County does, and that is, we've made a commitment. We've pushed hard to try to help that district go forward with this. I hate to see it just drop off the map. And if our commission has pretty much set that aside, it seems to me that it's in our court. And I don't know when the appropriate time would be for us to have that considered in a budget, for example. And maybe that happens in our October meeting, Mr. Chairman.
It would be in our October meeting, but certainly I would suggest that our sentiments be forwarded to the commission at their next meeting, that they reconsider not setting it aside. Just a second. Is there an issue, Ms. Anderson? Seems like you're.
Yes, sir. There is no methodology for the commission to put this forward. They can put forward projects with components, capacity, and condition. The Riverton Auditorium does not satisfy any of those projects. And so therefore, it would have to be something that was initiated through legislative.
It's in our.
Correct,
Okay.
correct. And the budget that was done, the 8.2 million that was appropriated, was it 2 years ago? 2 years ago was the 8.2 million. I just want to remind the committee that was 2 years ago, and we're in a different environment now. So I don't know if the 8.2 million would get the project done for them. So if you're considering that, I'd just like you to consider that budget is 2 years old, and those, it may not be adequate at this point. So that's why I was making the face. Sorry.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad.
Yeah, thank you. And she just beat me to that. So it's not on our radar because it doesn't qualify. So it wouldn't be on the commission's radar, but it very much can be on your guys' radar, and then we'll walk it back and we'll bring it back forward again.
Understood. Thank you for setting me straight. Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. That was the first point I was going to make, was that, I don't think they can bring it to us. And yes, it sounds like that's the case. But are we going to have our bill drafted for our October meeting? Our budget bill, is that planned, or are we going to discuss the budget and then have it drafted for a later meeting?
Let's ask staff.
I think historically, Senator, that's my recollection, is that the budget is presented and then there's a bill at the October meeting with that budget, but I'll confirm that and get back to you.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that when that bill is drafted, which I think it would be for our October meeting, that we include at least as a preliminary number, the previous funding, and recognize that might not be accurate, but let's include that in bill draft 1 so that we've got it for our consideration. We don't have to amend it in.
I would suggest I just heard off to the side here, maybe we ought to include an 8% inflation for the 2 years, but frankly, it's probably more like 12% now.
Yeah.
But we'll let the department figure out that number.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a second on the motion. All right, any discussion, committee, on the motion?
Question.
None? Okay, question on the motion? All those in favor? Pardon?
Director Vincent Pettit.
I'm sorry, I
Oh,
just want
do
to
you
make sure I
have-
understood, it was the motion, because what my comment was going to be that, you know, before we worry about what the construction cost is right now, that we move forward with some sort of a planning money so that we can get to the next level to determine that construction number and or study that might need to be done, because it's been, I'm not sure if that was included in what you were getting at, but I wanted to bring that up before you voted on it and made a motion.
Senator Rothfuss, what was your intent?
Mr. Chairman, I would budget for the entire amount, but recognizing that there's a planning component to it. And we've done that in the past where we have it two separate portions of the budget so that we've got planning in one part of the budget and then the construction aspect in the other part of the budget, which is how I would anticipate that we would put it forward, which has been typical, I think, of how we've drafted that in the past.
So a level 1 and level 2 and a separate level 3.
Very clear. I didn't want us not to do the planning, which helps get the
Correct.
better construction number, because we're waiting on the construction
Yeah.
number of money, and then we're caught in that catch-22. So
And-
thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, just as a side thought, we really do want to contemplate being, I think, cost efficient. And if we hurry the project, we might end up paying more than if we wait another year. We did that in Laramie High School, you recall, right? We turned down the first opera in Laramie High School, and we ended up coming back and saving several $1 million because we didn't like the timeline. The timeline was screwing us up and was costing us millions. And that was something that Senator Nicholas and I recommended, despite our school district's consternation at the time, was that we go out for bids again and push pause. And sometimes that honestly is the right approach. And we're in a COVID inflated environment where that might be something to consider, not just with this project, but literally with everything else we're doing. We might end up paying an incredible amount of money just to get something on the ground a year from now, when if it were 2 years from now, we'd save millions. So it's something to contemplate. I don't know whether it's the case this time, but just as a comment, I hope we're considering those types of things. But back on the motion, I call for the question.
Okay. Question's been called for. This will require no roll call on this one. We're just requesting. Yeah, that's right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, then we'll see that in October.
Thank you. We appreciate your support, appreciate your consideration, and I'll take that back to the district.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any further public comment? Carrying anybody online? Okay, so I think we've finished our morning session. Who? Oh, I'm sorry, staff.
Mr. Chairman, just as a clarification, you will direct staff to draft a budget based on the conversation this afternoon. We'll go ahead and include that 8.2 million in there. And then at your October meeting, you'll direct us whether you would like it as a separate bill draft or whether you'd like us to present it to JAC to be put in the budget bill.
Do we need a motion to that effect?
You will, but I think you'll probably do that after presentation of their budget.
Yeah. Well, good idea. All right, coming to the end of the morning, let's plan on coming back in an hour. So let's recess for lunch until 1:30. Thank you.